Between 2007 to 2011, I was working as an English teacher in rural Vietnam. I wanted to do something that was both rewarding and gave me the ability to travel, and I found the perfect job where I could do both. I lived very minimally in a small apartment, but I had made some friends and the kids were wonderful. They really liked it when I brought in something that was more popular in the US, such as small snacks, candies, or games. But there was one moment in my time there that left an everlasting effect on me. It was monsoon season, and the rain had been relentless for weeks. I was driving back from the small school where I taught, taking the rural route that I always did. The road wasn't great to begin with, as it was just packed with dirt and some gravel. But my tiny car handled pretty well on it, as I took it at least twice a day, every day. I remember checking my watch, and it was 4:47 p.m. There was this deep rumbling sound, like distant thunder, but it felt wrong. Quite literally. And that's when the front of my car just dropped. Before I could even process what was happening, the ground beneath me just collapsed. I remember feeling it in slow motion. I remember my car tilting forward and feeling weightless for a moment, and then there was a massive impact that knocked me unconscious. When I came to, everything was pitch black. My head was throbbing and my left shoulder felt like it was on fire. My car had landed almost completely vertical, wedged between what felt like rock walls. I could hear water, or at least I hoped it was water and not car fluids, trickling somewhere in the darkness. My phone had no signal, which was no surprise because it was just a pretty cheap phone anyways. I just needed something that I could mainly make and receive phone calls on, so working underground, that certainly wasn't going to happen. I tried opening the doors to get out, but they were either jammed or pressed against the walls of whatever hole I was in. I couldn't roll down the windows because they were electric, and to be honest, it had to be turned off, and I wasn't comfortable trying to start it. The only option I had left was to break a window, but damn if I didn't try. I tried with my heel, the end of my phone, and even just punching it, but it would not break. That's when I noticed water pooling at my feet. It was just enough to cover my toes, but it was building. It was just a trickle at the time, but as I held still and quiet, I could hear it picking up speed. And that's when I started to panic. If I didn't get out of that car, I was going to drown. By hour 3, it was to my waist, and I was at a loss of what to do. I was desperate and didn't have anything to use as a blunt object, so I went back to using my cell phone to try to break out the window. My windshield was cracked and there was already water covering the bottom part of it, so I decided to try to use that to my advantage. I started hammering at the cracks with my phone and I could see the cracks spreading, but it wasn't shattering. I wanted to cry, but instead, I tried to keep myself calm and figure out a different way to get out. First off, I'm not a small girl. I'm certainly not the type that can climb over seats in a car, sitting how it naturally should. So hoisting myself out of the driver's seat and trying to fight gravity was not an easy task. But I thought I should try kicking it while wearing my heels, since I might have been able to work that out with more force that way. I kicked a few times, pressing my back between the two front seats to hold me up. I kicked and kicked until finally the glass broke. But not because of me, because part of the road fell onto my car, breaking the windshield and what I thought my leg. It smashed down onto my leg, glass and gravel pushing against it. It was an excruciating pain at the time, and I remember yelling out and crying, and now I had to figure out how to pull my leg out. I screamed for help at this point, being pinned by this chunk of earth and shivering from fear and how cold the water was. The problem was, this road was rarely used, especially during bad weather. I was afraid that no one would hear me, no one would find me, and I would drown in the sinkhole. And when they did finally find the hole, they wouldn't see or hear anyone, and they would just fill it back up. leaving me in a watery tomb, and no one would even know where I had gone. As the water rose to my chest, I actually started singing to keep myself sane. I would sing anything I could remember. Disney songs, my favorite songs, then started making up new ones. Anything to distract me from the cold water and absolute darkness building around me. That's when I heard a voice. I went quiet and listened. My Vietnamese was terrible. I could have the most basic conversation in it, and some food items, but that was about it. I certainly didn't know what they were saying to me, but one word I did know was help. I just remember leaning over, trying to wave my arms to the windshield where there wasn't any water, and shouting help over and over again, going from Vietnamese to English. They called back something that I couldn't understand, and then there was silence. At that moment, I had never felt more alone. I had no way of knowing if they understood, if they were going to get help, or if they just walked away thinking they heard an animal or something. All I could do was hope that they went for help and that the water would slow down. I remember crying again at that point, thinking there was no way that they could save me in time. Even if they did come, they couldn't just jump down here. What if more of the road broke away and swallowed them up too? What if they didn't have a way down here? When the water reached my chin, I was pretty much ready to accept my fate. I closed my eyes and steadied my breathing, and told myself that it was better this way rather than flailing, suffocating, and dying in fear. I sat motionless, ready to take my last breath, when I heard the sound of very large engines. I tried my best to focus, and that's when I heard the talking. I called out for help again, and I finally heard a reply that I understood. "We'll get you out." I could cry just thinking about that. I didn't know how they were going to do it before I ran out of oxygen, but they did. I could see someone through the back window, their shadow getting bigger and bigger, and I realized they were coming down. They told me to take cover, and I took a deep breath and went under the water. I could hear the thud and the glass breaking. After a few seconds, I came back up and reached out to their hand through the back windshield. To get a better idea, my foot was stuck at the front windshield. I was wedged, kind of floating between the two front seats, and had my neck stretched out as far as I could to reach what was left of the air. This man grabbed my hands. I don't know if he knew that my leg was stuck or not, but he pulled. This was some of the worst pain that I'd felt, as the glass scraped against my leg, but he didn't stop. He pulled, and I wiggled until I was finally free, balancing myself on the back of my car, my arm around his shoulders. He asked if I was okay, and I said yeah. I don't think either of us knew what to say in that situation. Once we were out, he tried his best to explain how they were going to get us out now. The rescue took another hour or so, as they had to secure the area and figure out how to reach me without causing another collapse. This man, however, had tied himself to a tree and hoisted himself down in the hole to at least be with me, and to make sure that I wasn't trapped. I later found out that the hole was about 30 meters deep, and my car was wedged about halfway down. If it had fallen all the way, I wouldn't be writing this. Finally, they were able to start the rescue. The man yelled something back in Vietnamese, and someone from above dropped down some supplies. He started strapping all this rope and gear to me, explaining that they would pull me up. As much as I was ready to get the hell out of there, I still offered to let him go first. He smiled and told me, "No, ladies first," and then I was hoisted up. I remember holding on to that rope so tight. I looked down at the man once before I had to close my eyes in fear. I was worried the rope would snap, dropping me to my death, or that more of the road would collapse, dropping an emergency vehicle right on top of us both. But thankfully neither happened. They got me up. I got a few more bumps and nicks once back to the surface, but they quickly pushed me away from the blocked off area and made me take off the gear. I stood by a small woman who seemed to know a bit more English, while the other guy that helped ran back to the hole, tossing the gear down again. I watched as they pulled the other guy out, and he looked as calm as possible, like it was just another normal job for him. Once he was out, I bawled like a baby. I hugged the woman, the man that pulled me out of the car, and thanked them like crazy. I know sinkholes aren't uncommon in Vietnam, but having never dealt with that before, being in a foreign country, to me, and barely being able to speak to them made it that much more terrifying for me. And these people risked their own lives to save me, to save one person, and that I will never forget. I learned later that the person that initially called out for me did understand when I said help. They were trying to ask how many were down there, but I didn't understand that part. If he hadn't decided to take me seriously and tell someone, I wouldn't be here. The man that pulled me from my car was actually the father of one of my students. He recognized me when he saw my face. I felt bad, but I didn't recognize him at first, but to be fair, my mind was all over the place. The physical recovery was relatively quick. I had a dislocated shoulder, a concussion, and surprisingly didn't even break my leg. The skin was pretty shredded all around, and I still have some pretty nasty scars on it, but it's always a great conversation starter. I think the mental recovery was the hardest part. I was afraid to drive, especially alone. I'm terrified of heights now, and seeing those deep potholes damn near gives me a panic attack. But I'm alive. I'm alive to tell myself that the experience was once in a lifetime. It helps most days. I stayed there for another 1.5 years before I moved back to the States. And even with it nearly killing me, I would go back. It was still a peaceful area otherwise, and the people were kind. In fact, kind doesn't even begin to describe them. I will never forget the selflessness to all those involved that day. They saved my life, and that is something I will never take for granted. I'm not usually the type to get into these sorts of things, and I don't do things that are illegal. I want to get that out there right away. I am pretty tech savvy, but I use my computer for work, hobbies, and just the normal everyday user stuff. But I got curious at one point. I don't remember how or why my intrigue started, but I know there was a conversation with someone I work with about things on the dark web. And that conversation led to interest, which led to me being stupid. Curiosity killed the cat, right? So, after that whole curiosity started to scratch at me, I decided I would just do it. I had no plans to do anything illegal. Not everything on the dark web is illegal. Some of it is just too edgy for the surface. And I knew how to be safe. I watched a few tutorials on how Tor worked, how to use it, what the whole non-indexed thing meant, the difference between dark and deep, etc. I was educated in a very shallow sense. So I got Tor installed and running and read more on how to use it, and then started down a rabbit hole. One thing about using the dark web that you don't consider is how tense you feel when you're going through things. It's probably because of the social stigma, but everything I clicked felt grimy. Like I was one click away from committing a felony, which sounds kind of silly, I know. After a while, I ended up on this forum that was more or less just white text on a plain black background. It was like a very plain text version of 4chan. More plain text than what 4chan even is. There were subjects about a few things, nothing too crazy. A lot of it was people talking about movies, where to download them, hacking, exploits. A lot of cybersecurity talk, honestly. There were a few that were talking about how they had scraped a database and wanted to sell the data, but I stayed away from that because I knew that that would have been bad. Then I found one that was a post from someone saying, "Hey, today is my birthday. Come to my party." And then there was an Onion address listed after it. I don't know why I decided to check that link out. I don't know why I was like, hey, this will surely be a troll. or something about a legit party. But I decided that I wanted to know. The link took a long time to load. Or rather, it looked like it was taking a long time to load. It was just a black screen with a spinning wheel making it look like something was coming. I sat there for like 5 minutes just waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. I assumed it was a dead link, so I closed it out and forgot about it. I didn't do much else after that on the dark web. I had satisfied my curiosity and was pretty much just done for a while. And that is until the next day. This is when things got weird and scary. I was on Facebook, doom scrolling like I always did in the mornings, when I got an event invite. It popped up in my notifications and was simply titled, "Come to my party." The profile picture was just a black square. The event image was just black, and there wasn't much info beyond a location and a very short description. The location for this event was an abandoned mall, about 15 minutes from my house. I used to go there with my high school friends back before it closed, and after it closed we broke in once and we walked around and it was creepy. It took me a few minutes of WTF to really put together the connection. The whole "come to my party" thing from that onion link that I clicked, and then this invite. The description is what did it for me. You clicked my link, now you have to come to my party. I freaked out. I mean, freaked out. I deleted the event invite, changed my Facebook privacy settings to completely lock everything down to private. Then, I got an email to my personal email address that had the same subject: "Come to my party." And the text in the email was just, "You clicked my link, you have to come to my party." The address that it came from was a string of random characters, and the domain was also random characters. It was clearly some sort of spoof that wasn't a real address. I did not sleep that night. I spent the entire night doing security scans on my system, checking my files, researching how to find malware outside of scans, but nothing came up on any of my security scans. I actually went through all of my accounts and changed all of my passwords, put tape over my webcam, and disconnected the computer from the network when I was done. I was feeling more than a bit paranoid, but it really did mess with me. Clearly this guy had gotten my information, at least my Facebook and my email, and he was messing with me. It was a prank. It had to be. I was dumb enough to click his link and he was just teaching me a lesson. I was completely offline for the entire weekend, a full 2 days. Slightly more than 2 days, actually. I had to plug it back in to get some work done, so I did. At some point, I ended up back on Facebook, and I noticed that I had a friend request. I had locked everything down to friends of friends, so I was sure this wasn't anything related, but when I looked at the account, it was clearly a fake person. Black square profile picture, no banner. Their name was Anani Mouse, and they were somehow friends with my aunt. I declined the request and messaged my aunt telling her this guy wasn't real and that she needed to unfriend him. I framed it like he's a scammer trying to steal money, something that would get her attention. Again, I thought it was over, but the day after that, I got another email from another string of random characters, though it was a bit different from the first. The subject said, "RE, my party." The email was just as cryptic as everything else. It said, "You missed my party. You were the guest of honor and you didn't show up. I'm so disappointed." And that was it. There was nothing else to explain the whole trick. Nothing to tell me what this guy wanted. That's literally all it said. So, I know that may sound anticlimactic, but I have to tell you that I was terrified. I wasn't sure if there was going to be more of this, if this guy was going to come for me or what, but I was scared. Thankfully, there hasn't been another message. and this was over a year ago at this point. So I think that he's done with me. I haven't gotten back on Tor or any dark web pages since this happened, and I have zero intention to ever go back again. I don't know what would have happened if I had showed up to the party, and I really don't even want to think about it. Who knows? Maybe there really was a party. Maybe they would have harvested my kidneys. Don't know, won't know. And at this point, I'm just glad to be past it. Of course, if I ever get another message from this guy, I'll make sure to make an update to all this, but for now, I think I'm in the clear. So, this one might be a little weird for you. It may be a little different than what you might normally do because it's not exactly creepy. But it is pretty bizarre to me, and maybe even some kind of parallel existence, I think. Either way, it's just something that I have to share, and I think you'll appreciate it too. I've been taking the red line every morning for many years now. It's become part of my everyday life. And like many of us, I am a creature of habit, and have my routine down to a science. I know exactly what time I have to leave by. I stand in the same spot while I wait for the train, and then sit in the same car in the same spot near the middle doors. And like most commuters, I people watch, and I start to recognize the other regulars on the route. There was a guy who was usually dressed in a suit, carrying a thermos with a picture of a family on it, like one of those cute customized mugs. And there were two older ladies that sat in the back and always had these very animated conversations. There was another guy I only saw occasionally, but he had on some sort of maroon-colored uniform and had a large messenger bag. All normal, everyday people going about their lives. But then there was one girl that I started seeing that caught my attention. She got on 2 stops after me. At first, I noticed her because she looked a lot like me. Same shoulder-length brown hair, similar height and build, and even similar kind of style. That artsy but professional look that says probably works at a gallery or design studio. Real quote from a friend of mine. But I really started paying attention when I realized that she had worn the same outfit 3 days in a row. It was this oversized cream-colored sweater, brown pants, and these unique red boots. At first, you may be thinking, just as I did, that maybe she had multiple versions of the same outfit. I'm guilty of buying the same sweater in different colors if I like it enough. But it wasn't just the same style of clothes. It was the same thing. Because her sweater had what appeared to be a coffee stain on it. Her hair was kind of messy too. Either it was down and frizzy, pulled back in a low ponytail, or maybe thrown in a lopsided messy bun, like she couldn't be bothered with it. I remember seeing it, the satin on her sweater, and thinking, same, girl, I've had those days. And I had sympathy for her. This is why I remembered her in the way she looked. But she wore this exact same outfit for 3 days in a row, and I definitely noticed. By the 4th day, I was very fascinated and curious. Same outfit, same coffee stain, same messy bun. She even stood in the same spot in the same way, standing with her weight on her left foot while holding her phone in her right hand. I tried to run it through in my head. Maybe she was staying somewhere other than home and didn't have a change of clothes. Maybe she didn't have much in ways of options. I wasn't sure. Was it interesting to notice? Yeah. But I tried my best to not think about it more than that because I didn't know her situation, right? Part of me did think about taking a picture to make sure I wasn't imagining things, but I also told myself that it would be creepy. You know, taking a picture of a stranger on a train? Yeah, no thanks. But this went on for 2 weeks straight. I still didn't, but that is when I really wanted to take a picture. I started feeling like I was in some weird loop, like I was going in circles, and until something changed, something differentiated, I would continue this loop. That maybe she was in this weird loop too. Did she see it? Was she aware of it? Because other than the messy hair and stained sweater, she didn't look disheveled, stressed, nothing. She looked normal. I even saw the other regulars, but they seemed to act like she wasn't really there. The old ladies that liked to look at everyone on the train didn't even glance at her. No one said excuse me to her as they passed her since she was standing. So, why was this happening? Why was this girl that I had never seen prior now taking the train daily wearing the exact same thing? Same clothes, same boots, same phone case, silver ring on her middle finger, same posture. Everything was the same. And I swear I seemed to be the only one to notice. I felt like I was losing my mind, or that this was all some huge prank or experiment to see if anyone would notice. Then, one day, I was having one of those mornings. You know the type. My hair refused to cooperate, and I was running low on time, so I just threw it all in a messy clip. I was wearing my old comfortable jeans with the worn spot since I wasn't feeling well. I was still groggy as I was getting ready to leave, and I fumbled my coffee cup while trying to put my phone in my pocket, spilling it down the side of my shirt and sweater. I was already running late, so I didn't have time to change. I just told myself that I would deal with it being a little cold at work and not wear my sweater. My shirt was darker, so I could at least hide it there. So I rushed out the door, now wearing my coffee instead of getting to enjoy it. I got to the train and I sat in my regular spot, and then we stopped where the other girl would get on. And at that moment, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was styled, sailing in soft waves with braids on the sides, all pinned back by a large flower. She was wearing a long-sleeved blue dress and looked so pretty and put together in a way that made my coffee-stained self feel even more disheveled. I was surprised by this change, but also refreshed to see it, especially on that day. That weekend, I got some extra sleep and started feeling better. I went to bed early that Sunday and had my clothes picked out. The next morning, I made an extra effort, did my makeup, my hair was nicely done. I wore one of my favorite frilly blouses and a new pair of jeans that I bought. That same morning on the train, I anticipated that whatever cycle we were in was broken, and looked forward to seeing the same girl. But she got on wearing that same stained sweater and messy hair. What happened? What was so different about yesterday? Why did she wear something different? So I started thinking about it more, and the only thing I could think of was myself. I was running late and wasn't put together like I usually was. It was like we were polar opposites. Was that it? So I decided to test that theory. The next day I wore leggings and an oversized sweater. My hair was unwashed and pulled into a ponytail, and I skipped the makeup, other than some chapstick. Astonishingly, she looked beautiful and dressed up, wearing a pink skirt and heels with her hair curled. Was this some kind of parallel version of myself? Can no one else see her because of this? Did she have people on her train that could see me? How did we end up on the same train anyways? I had never seen her prior to this incident. I wanted to talk to her, maybe just small talk to see what she might say. Maybe she noticed our similarities too, but I was worried that either she would think I was crazy, talking to some random stranger about being another version of me, or if it was real, what could I mess up from talking to her? So I did the only thing I was brave enough to do. I watched. I watched how I had bad days and she looked stunning. I had good days and she was back in the sweater. But it did do a little good for me because when I'm having one of those rough days, those days where your shirt just doesn't feel comfortable on you and your hair isn't cooperating, well, I can't help but smile knowing that she probably feels unstoppable. I'm truly glad that I found your channel, Raven, and that you accept crazy stories from your loyal followers and listeners, because it does make my day to listen to your videos while working on pretty boring and often immature workplace. College was some of my more chaotic moments in history, and all kinds of things happened at the community college I attended right after high school. I probably should have just gone to a university, but anyways. This story happened on the last day of classes for my final year of college. Let's call this story Kill Code, and yes, it's another true story. Our friend group in Intro to Computers class probably was the tightest friend group I ever had, and would ever have. They were all new people that I met after graduation, and spent the entirety of my 2 years of college hanging with and knowing. From the story with Ben and Penny to various love dramas and other mishaps in our group, we all grew to be a happy band of anime-loving, computer-programming, geeky friends. Until one of our friends betrayed the other, and ruined our sacred bond. To protect these two once lovable idiots, let's give them different names. And even though this happened over a decade ago in 2013, I hope that they got over this issue. Pamela and Marilyn were the best of friends for a long time. They did everything together, and often couldn't be seen without the other one there, any time that you saw them on or off campus. On the surface, they were the textbook of two besties. Only Pamela was actually part of our computer class group, and Marilyn was like a transplant because she knew little to nothing about computers. One of my other friends in the group told me that not everything with Pamela and Marilyn was as it seemed, and told me to keep an eye on them if I wanted to know what she meant. So I did, and eventually it made sense. Marilyn would do things, like invite the group for weekend outings, or ask to go shopping, the movies, amusement parks, or wherever she wanted to go. And somehow Pamela always ended up being the one to pay for it. We caught on to it and stopped agreeing to go unless Pamela herself said that she wanted to do this for our group. And Pamela was shy, but she would speak up for herself, usually in a teary, red-faced manner, where she was half screaming and half crying. She came off like an anime girl that way, but she was adorable to us. Marilyn eventually caught on to the restriction against her by way of us declining her invitations to hang, and one day there apparently was a fight between Marilyn and Pamela, and Marilyn had her boyfriend double-team Pamela and tell her that she was being selfish, and trying to set the group against Marilyn because she was jealous of her. For visual understanding, Marilyn was tall, slender, and had long black hair, and what I will explain as well-developed features that most guys liked. Pamela was short, skinny, and had short brown hair to the point that she always got mistaken for a cute boy instead of a nerdy girl. Her physique also didn't help, but admittedly she was cute and super smart. Either way, it didn't go over well, and after a rumor came out that Pamela tried to sleep with Marilyn's boyfriend, we officially told Pamela to steer clear of both of them, and proceeded to excommunicate Marilyn, since both of them actually tried to set up Pamela by inviting her over to Marilyn's apartment, where her boyfriend tried to come on to Pamela. I'll leave the details out, but nothing happened to her. The final straw was when Marilyn began telling other people that Pamela was promiscuous, and basically ruined Pamela's reputation outside of our computer class group, until people from our group began questioning Pamela. We invited Marilyn and her boyfriend over to discuss things as a group before playing our usual D&D campaign. Don't ask if you don't know. But that night, all that happened was a big fight about whether or not to just get over what Marilyn did. And also we found out that Pamela had retaliated on her own against Marilyn by unlocking a private collection of photos of Marilyn in what I'll describe as adult-themed scenarios, which was supposed to be an anniversary gift for her boyfriend. And she had logged into Marilyn's Facebook page and shared them all publicly. She then changed Marilyn's passcode and locked her out of the account. We were shocked, but not surprised. Marilyn has been wild and aggressive with Pamela, but we were also split on how we felt about all of it, and this left our group split on how to feel. The last straw was, again, on my last day of classes, when we agreed to have a party that night to celebrate our second year of college ending and pretty much surviving the chaos of the year. Pamela found me in the cafe, yes, the same on-campus cafe from the Penny story, and told me that she needed help getting off campus today. I told her to call one of our friends with a car and ask for a ride home, because I didn't have a car and was going to ride with our friends to the party that night. She shook her head and said that she wasn't going tonight, and that she'd had her final straw with Marilyn. Apparently, Marilyn and her boyfriend had threatened to call Pamela's mom and tell her everything about what had happened with the photos, and basically try to get Pamela cut off from her rich family, unless Pamela sent her a substantial amount of money for Marilyn for her emotional damage. Side note, we all knew Pamela's family was very, very financially set, and Pamela told us about her financial allowances once or twice in the past, when one of our other friends asked why she always seemed to have so much money. Anyway, Pamela said she broke down and pretended to agree, and convinced Marilyn that she would have to do the transaction from Marilyn's laptop in order to connect her bank with Marilyn's PayPal to transfer the money. She then pulled Marilyn's laptop out of her backpack and sat it on the table to prove that she had her computer. The smile Pamela gave me was less than chilling, but somewhat sadistic, as she told me to give this to Marilyn before I left, and tell her that all she had to do was log into her computer and sign on to her PayPal on Chrome to accept the transaction. I felt weary of this, but nonetheless I didn't ask, because I also wanted to keep distance from this situation. I didn't agree with either side, but I did know that Marilyn started this fight, and since Pamela could be hard to convince, I didn't feel like telling her that this felt off, and that whatever she was about to do was a bad idea. I also didn't have any proof that Pamela had done anything, and since the situation between Marilyn and Pamela was already splitting the group, I just nodded and agreed to deliver the laptop. Man, I wish I had just told her to deliver the laptop herself. Long story short, Marilyn got her laptop back and we all met up later on that night, minus Marilyn and Pamela, to have our party. Halfway through the party, one of our friends got an angry call from Marilyn, who spent most of it screaming uncontrollably. And a few minutes later, she and her boyfriend pulled up looking for Pamela, who wasn't there, and apparently wasn't at her own home either. Marilyn demanded that we tell them where she was, and by this point, we had all just had enough. But when Marilyn snatched her laptop out of her bag and tossed it onto the table, we knew that things had taken a horrible turn between them both. The outside looked fine, but when one of our other friends picked it up, it was hot and had a hole in the bottom of it. The screen was discolored and looked like someone took a heat gun to it, and overall, we all knew what a fried laptop looked like. It was a legit oh crap moment for all of us, and one of our friends called Pamela and put her on speaker. She answered and the call went like this. "Hello, Pamela?" "Yes." "Marilyn just showed up with her laptop and she said you did something to it. Did you?" "Yes." "What did you do to her computer?" "Kill code." "What?" She tried to blackmail me, so I replaced every icon on her desktop with the program to kill her laptop. Maybe she shouldn't have thought she was smarter than me, and also been dumb enough to give me her laptop. She's greedy, she's narcissistic, she's evil, and she deserved it. Enjoy your party, and don't ever call me again. None of you were truly my friends. And Pamela hung up. Pamela had dealt the coldest blow we ever saw, and I never heard from her again after that. Marilyn and her boyfriend left after that, but at that point, Pamela had one-upped Marilyn so bad that none of us ever truly recovered from the situation. We all stopped hanging out shortly after that issue. Moral of the story is, don't underestimate people because they're timid, shy, or friendly. The nicer they are, the more dangerous they could be. I, 34 female, have had one encounter with a psychic medium that I still think about to this day that has always stuck with me. Back in about 2012, I was a 22-year-old, very, very heartbroken young woman. I'll spare the details, but to sum it up, my first love shattered my heart in the way that I viewed love and relationships forever. I was working as a server at a local pub. The pub was open until 2 a.m., 7 days a week, which is relevant to the story. One weeknight, I was the only server on the floor that night, and typically the dining room area is closed by this time. However, I chose to leave it open because it didn't bother me if people chose to seat themselves in this area. It just meant more walking for me as the server, which I was okay with. I was going about my typical server duties, attending to tables in the bar area, when I noticed a man about mid to late 50s appeared out of nowhere, seated in the dining room alone. I quickly made my way over and apologized for not greeting him at the door. He said that he preferred to sit in the quiet area of the restaurant because it's too loud in crowded areas. However, on this particular night, it wasn't loud or busy on the bar floor. Nonetheless, I took his drink and meal order and went about my work duties. The drinks and meal were served without any issues, and as I was checking on him to see if he needed anything else, as servers do, he decided to tell me that he can read auras. I could tell that he was sort of testing the waters to see how open I would be to this type of conversation. I must have shown interest because he proceeded to tell me that my aura was blue, amongst a few other characteristics that I found very interesting, and that he was a psychic reader and can sense these things around him, which is why he prefers to stay away from the crowds, because it gets too overwhelming. I have always kept open mind about these sort of things, even though I've never personally experienced anything like this before. The exchange was pleasant, and I made one last round to cash him out, and as I dropped off his card, I noticed his demeanor had changed somewhat, and he looked very intently into my eyes. He then said, "Don't let him hurt you anymore." Now, I was very much taken aback by this comment, because I had never met this man before, and to my knowledge, he didn't know anything about my life, and I had not divulged any personal information to him this night either. I asked him to repeat himself, and he did not repeat himself. But he instead just looked at me with intense intention, and in that moment, it was understood that we both knew what he meant, and he didn't need to repeat it. Tears welled up in my eyes immediately, and I muttered something to the extent of, "Okay, thank you," and rushed away. I had just made it to the back kitchen area as I burst into tears. I just couldn't believe how strong of a reaction this one comment evoked in me. Was it so obvious just by looking at me that I was that heartbroken? Could he read it on my face? Honestly, probably. Or was this man truly clairvoyant or psychic and was able to know my current struggles without being told? Possibly. Either way, This one interaction with this man I had never met will always stick with me. Because of him, I do believe in psychic abilities. I wasn't able to speak to him again because by the time I returned back to the bar floor, he was gone. So, man in the dining room, I hope that we meet again someday. About 6 months ago, I submitted a post about the haunted house that I was living in. We moved out recently, and I wasn't planning to post about it again, but the last few weeks I lived there, I experienced an increase in paranormal activity. I had always seen glimpses of a face peering around my bedroom doorway. It was very tall, nearly to the top of the door frame, leaning at an angle as though it was crouching to look inside. I would also see a small child standing or running in and out of the doorway. They were both completely dark figures, but not black. It's hard to explain, but they had this swirling texture. They were very solid shapes and not translucent. I had to learn to ignore them, but I started seeing them all over the house as I was preparing to move. Even if there wasn't a doorway, like leaning around the side of the kitchen cabinets, or the corner of the hallways, or window blinds. In my previous post, I mentioned the little kid entity imitating my little brother. I continued to hear it running around and getting into my brother's toys until the day we left. I noticed things that I was packing would be rearranged when I was the only one in the house. Like, I had a neat stack where everything was in the order that it needed to be, loaded into the truck, and when I brought out the next box from my room, my boxes would be in my mom's pile, opened, or just unstacked and placed in some random order. I also kept seeing a mass of some kind in the bathtub. I thought that it was a bear a few times, but it was mostly just a huge blob made of the same swirling texture as the doorway things. It was very large and moved around a lot, but would vanish instantly if I turned on the light. But the thing that made me want to talk about this house again was the weirdest shadow person experience I have ever had. I mentioned in my previous posts that I see them a lot, but this was very different than any others that I have seen. I was in my room one night and I had just called my cats in for the night, and one of them hadn't come in yet. I was feeding the other two when I heard him meowing at the front door. I went to let him in, but when I was halfway to the door, I saw a tall figure step around the corner in front of me and stand in front of the hallways. It was a solid black shadow person wearing a bright orange t-shirt. He didn't have any pants. He was muscular and taller than me, I'm 5'2", and he was maybe an inch or two more than I was. I stood facing him, waiting for him to move for around 30 seconds, and I felt very angry that he was there. My cat meowed again, and I said out loud, staring into this thing's face, "Move now or I will hurt you." He flinched and slowly stepped back into the living room. And after a few seconds, I stuck my head around the corner to make sure he was gone. Then I let my cat in. The rest of that night and the next day were weirdly uneventful. But the next night, I had a dream that I was getting my 4-year-old brother and myself dressed, and ready to go somewhere with my mom when she gets home from work. I knew she would be on her way home and wanted to be ready when she got there. But then I heard someone pounding on the door demanding to be let in. I looked out the peephole, but I didn't see anyone, even in the dream. I got this sick feeling in my stomach. I reached to lock the door, but the shadow person I saw in the hallway opened it faster than I could, breaking one of the hinges off with the force. I ran and hid my brother in the closet, trying to distract him with his tablet. I listened to the shadow person stomping around the house, which was empty except for the beds in the bedrooms. I heard him slamming doors, and somehow I knew he had a knife. At one point, I heard him close himself in a room and grabbed my brother to try to make a run for the door, but I got a feeling that there were more people outside, so I ran through the living room, which had changed. It was much larger with concrete pillars spaced evenly throughout. Thinking about it now, it looked like some kind of liminal space. As we made it through to where my mom's room should be, the part of the house changed to one I had lived in when I was 6 or 7, and I locked me and my brother in the room that had been my parents' when we lived there. My brother was talking really loud, getting frustrated and not wanting to stay in the room, and I couldn't get signal to call my mom or 911. So I put my brother in the closet and gave him my phone as a distraction, and I snuck out of the room, locking the door behind me. There was nothing I could use as a weapon, but I saw the shadow person in the living room, walking between the pillars. I yelled at him, "I never said you could come in. You can't be here. You can't hurt us." He shrugged and said, "Fine, I'll get you next time," and waved his knife at me as he walked out the door, closing it behind him, and everything went back to the way it was supposed to be and then faded to black, which was also unusual for me because my dreams end very abruptly. I never saw the shadow person again, but I'm still shaken by the interaction and I don't know what to make of it. I've never been that close to a shadow person and have never been able to look directly at them before or since. Hi, Raven. I've recently come across your YouTube channel and I've enjoyed all the stories so far. They're interesting, intriguing, and relatable. I have always had unusual paranormal experiences occur in my life with no way to explain them. They happen sporadically when I least expect it, and leave me completely baffled. I regard myself now, in my 50s, as a spiritual person, and am open to experiences. However, the story that I am going to explain happened in my 30s, at a time of turmoil after separating from my ex-husband. I believe that this was the beginning of my spiritual journey in my life. I was living in a 2-story townhouse, and the living areas were downstairs with the bedrooms upstairs. I was on my own and childless as my children were with their father this weekend. It was late at night and I had just turned off the lights to go to sleep. I couldn't tell you if I was semi-asleep or still trying to fall asleep, as I don't remember. But what I do remember is hearing footsteps at the ground level of my townhouse, and they were definitely the sound of shoes walking on my tiled floor. I started to panic as I listened to the footsteps below. They were heading towards the staircase and then proceeded up the stairs towards the bedrooms. The footsteps continued towards my bedroom until I see this tall man with shoulder-length dark wavy hair dressed in a light-colored suit. It seemed like a light cream-colored suit. The strange thing about this is that it was dark in my bedroom as I had turned the lights off, but I saw him clearly, almost as though he was illuminated. He stood by my bedroom door and stared at me for what appeared to be 5 to 10 seconds. I was so afraid, but I managed to ask him several times, "Who are you? Who are you?" This apparition appeared solid and not at all transparent, which is why I thought it was actually a person. He kept his eyes locked on me and proceeded to slowly walk from the left side of my bed where the door was, over to the right, and not once did his eyes look away from me. As this apparition was reaching the right side of my bed, a white light projected down from the right side corner of the room. I would describe it as a flash of light, but a slow flash. I hope that makes sense. At the moment when the light appeared, this man/apparition disappeared. I was so scared that I quickly turned my bedside lamp on and left the lamp on all night, too scared to be sleeping in the dark. I've never understood why this happened to me, and it's something that I can still recall with clarity to this day. This morning was the worst morning of my life, and let me tell you why. I woke up around 7 in the morning, like I would always do for work. I turned off my alarm and swiped up to unlock my phone. After unlocking my phone, I went to my camera app to see if I had any pimples on my face because I was too lazy to go check in the mirror as I was still waking up. Then, I went from 10 to 100 real quick when I saw an image or video at the bottom left of the screen. I don't remember having this on my camera because the last time I took a photo was 3 days ago, and I remembered exactly what I took a photo of. When I clicked on it, I saw that it was a video. I pressed play, and when I watched this video, I felt as if my whole world was coming to an end. The video shows a person entering my room, walking up to my bed, and coming right next to me. The person then clearly kneeled down, and it showed my face facing the camera, capturing me sleeping and snoring. I felt like I was going to vomit after watching it. I'm very surprised that I didn't wake up from this. I tend to not be that deep of a sleeper. This person was most likely an intruder. I then walked around my whole apartment and checked if anything was stolen. Thankfully, nothing was stolen. I also saw that I accidentally forgot to lock my door after I came home, and I felt like a complete idiot for not doing this. What person could do that kind of thing? This person just walked through my apartment, came into my room, grabbed my phone, then walked out of my room only to come back and take a video of me sleeping. I then texted all my friends asking if they did this just to mess with me or play a joke on me. Everyone responded with a firm no, and I believe all of them. I felt like even more of an idiot for not having any sort of passcode or Face ID on my phone. I changed that after eating my breakfast. I then went to my Photos app and checked if this was actually recorded on my phone. I went to the media type selection and it said that it was airdropped to my phone. I decided that I would not report this to the police because there was nothing that they would be able to do. After all, I do live alone with no security cameras and simply just forgot to lock the door. I then got myself together and went on about the rest of my day pretending like it had never happened. I don't know what the intruder's goal was with recording a video of me sleeping and not stealing anything in my apartment. It's very strange to say the least. Maybe they were trying to scare me and have me intimidated every night. I hope not. I'm about to go to sleep now, and I hope something like this doesn't happen again this morning. This time I remembered to lock my door. However, I'm still paranoid that this will happen again sometime, and I have a bold assumption that this person never left my apartment and is still hiding somewhere as I speak. Just a quick heads up, this story does require a content warning, as it does dabble into some very, very serious and potentially triggering topics, in some detail, not a ton of detail, but definitely some. So these topic matters do involve abuse and violence at the hands of a family member, so that's just the trigger warning there, and we'll continue to the story now. I'm pretty new to your channel, but I'm fairly keen on the family secrets and similar videos, because of something that happened to me as a young child. It was a pretty dark and terrifying moment in mine and my mother's life, but now that I'm almost 50, I have healed for the most part. I know my mother doesn't like to talk about it, however. It's taken me a while to finally sit down and type all this up, but I decided I would like to share the story with you and your audience, too. Before I get started, I do want to warn you that it is pretty graphic and deals with domestic abuse. I'll only include the stuff relevant to the story, but I just wanted to give you a trigger warning in case someone doesn't want to listen. I also want to say that I was pretty young, and while I remember a lot of it, there are parts that my mother had to tell me about, or explain, so there will be both perspectives in this. Here it goes. This happened back in the summer of 1987, when I was 8 years old. My father was a horrible human being. My mother and he were forced into what many would refer to as a shotgun wedding. Mistakes were made, and I was born into a very hostile environment. While my mother did everything she could to raise me, take care of me, and give me the love every child should know, my father was the opposite. All he wanted back then was, for lack of a better word, one-night stands. But his luck ran out when my mom was the first one that got pregnant. He didn't want a kid, let alone a family. He still wanted to be carefree and be with anyone he wanted. Of course, a ring and a child didn't stop him. He still did what he wanted, had affairs, stayed away for nights on end, and my mom, who was only 16 at the time, couldn't do anything about it. There were several times where she went without eating to make sure that I could. And before anyone asks, no, her family didn't want to help either. They practically disowned her after she confessed that she was pregnant. She tried to work where she could, wherever they would allow her to bring in a baby, until I was old enough to go to school. But the older I got, the more I witnessed, and even experienced, the abuse. When he was home, he was 3 sheets to the wind. My mom did her best to just ignore him and avoid him, but sometimes that wasn't enough. He would find some reason to be angry with her. He would find a reason to beat her. I used to cry when I saw it, but then he would smack me around and tell me to be a man, so I had to look away, put my head down just to prevent getting hit. But then something miraculous happened. I was out of school, sick, and my mom didn't want to leave me at home alone, so she brought me to work. At the time, she was cleaning houses and had brought me with her to one of her customers' homes. It was an older woman, the kind that I wished was my own grandmother. She was what I would imagine in a grandma. When I would go with my mother to her home, she always had something prepared for me. She had no kids, no sign that any lived or visited but for me, specifically. She bought a small basket with a few toys, and some books for me to keep occupied while I was there. She was a wonderful human being. I remember listening to my mother and her talk, and she did everything she could to convince my mother to leave my father. She said that she would help her, and even offered to let her stay in her guest room until she found her own place. I remember begging my mother to take it. I remember telling her how I would have so much more fun here with her, but I think it was a pride thing, and I could never blame her for that. She wanted to do it all on her own, so she declined the offer. Until one day my father beat her so hard she didn't leave the house for a week. I remember how swollen her eye was and how awful I felt looking at it as much as I did. I remember the guilt because it was my fault. He had grabbed her by her hair, and I kicked him in the leg, yelling at him to let her go. He kicked me hard enough to toss me back, causing my mom to react, turning his attention back to her. When she was able to open her other eye again, she went back to work, and that was when that woman offered again. And that time she took it. I remember my mom packing a large suitcase with all of my clothes, and told me to fill the box with all of my favorite toys because she couldn't promise that I would get to keep all of them. I remember being really sad about it, but I could tell by the tone in her voice that this was important, so I did as she asked. I remember taking the suitcase and the box to the woman's house, and she actually had given us full reign of her basement. There's actually a decent-sized room down there where we kept our stuff, and a small area behind the room, with a divider separating the laundry area. She told me that I could use that as my own playroom, and I was pretty excited about it. It was almost the size of my room anyhow. The next day, my mom picked me up from school and told me that she would be doing that from now on, and to not get on the bus again. Everything was fine for those first few days. My mom was basically the live-in housekeeper, but the woman still cooked for us sometimes, giving my mom a break. And It just made me realize even more how much I was missing out on such a loving and safe home environment. She asked me about school and she told me stories. I could tell my mother was a lot happier and relaxed being there too. I was ready for this life. Then, there was that normal day at the grocery store where everything came undone. It was a Sunday morning. My mother and I went to the grocery store for one of the errands that she would run. As we were heading to the car, another car pulled up next to us, and we heard a familiar voice call out, saying my mother's name. I saw the way her whole body went rigid, just as she did at home. We both turned and saw my dad sitting in some car that we didn't recognize. My mom did her best to be strong. I could hear it in her voice as she asked him what he wanted, something she would have never done at home. He claimed that he wanted to talk, and she refused. He made a comment about going to the police because he wanted to see his kid. After some hushed arguing, my mom begging him not to do this, her shoulders finally dropped as he demanded we get in the car. She said that she was technically working, so we had to make this quick, and told me to hop in the back, assuring me everything would be okay. I will add here that, at this point, my mother was already working on the custody part and a restraining order, but at the time, back in the 80s, it was more of a challenge for her, at least, with the police that she worked with. I don't know if anyone had a different experience with it. Her fear was, since the custody wasn't finalized, she didn't want him to risk claiming that she kidnapped him and then lose her chance of getting full custody. Again, I don't blame her for this. She did everything she could. So, we did as he demanded. We got in the car, and he sped off. My mom asked where we were going, and he said somewhere they could talk in private, as a family. I remember thinking he was just going to take us home, but that wasn't the case at all. He kept going down roads I wasn't familiar with, gravel streets with no signs, until we arrived at some old farmhouse in what appeared to be the middle of nowhere. There was nothing else around us. Not a single soul or car on that road that we took. What's worse is that I had drifted off multiple times, and from what my mother told me afterwards, we were driving for a little over an hour. He took us somewhere far away from what we knew. My mom didn't move from the seat, so neither did I. My dad got out, walked around to her side, and dragged her out of the car. I watched, terrified, as she fell to the ground, being dragged by her arm. Then he opened my door and started doing the same to me. I got out a bit more willingly, not wanting to get scratched up. He then yanked my mother up, yelling at her to get inside. I remember clinging to my mother, afraid to let her go. Once inside the house, it was nearly furnished, but everything was covered in dust. I didn't know where we were or what this place was. He told me to go sit on the couch, and he turned on this old TV that was playing something I was not interested in. I think they were talking about lawn care or something, but I just pretended to be interested in it, not wanting to turn around and witness what was happening behind me. I could piece it together in my head from the sounds alone. There was yelling, "You don't get to leave me, you didn't want us in the first place." There were sounds of flesh hitting flesh, sounds of pain and crying from my mom, yelling, and all I could do was stare at the TV in front of me and cry, knowing the moment that he saw the tears or heard me crying, I would get the same. I don't know how long it went on, but it felt like hours, going through different shows. Eventually I heard him tell her that if we even thought about leaving, he would kill us. And then I heard the front door slam shut. I turned around and saw my mother in the worst condition I had ever seen her in. I just wanted to hug her and hold her and take away all of her pain, but I knew at that age I couldn't do anything for us. We were there for 6 days. 6 days of him beating her senseless, telling her to do things such as make us dinner. She struggled to move and he beat her more because of it. But after the second day, he started tying her to the chair when he left. I didn't know it at the time, but I had fallen asleep after she comforted me and she was looking for a way to leave when he caught her in the act. So anytime he left the house, or even slept, she stayed there tied to the chair. He just told me not to move from the spot in the tiny living room or else he would do the same to me. I was afraid that I was going to die if he did, so I listened. The fourth day, she sat in the chair by the wall, slumped over, hardly moving. She didn't eat the day prior, and she hadn't eaten that day either. I was scared. I was afraid that she was dying and she would leave me with him. I tried to get her to drink water from my cup, but she choked, and I remember crying thinking that I was making it worse. But she still did her best for me. She would look up occasionally and try to smile at me and whisper that we would be okay. I don't know if she believed it, but she still tried to do what she could from that chair to comfort me. But looking back at it now and talking to her about it, she had a plan. She was still planning an escape for us, or at least me. She was in a lot of pain and she definitely needed medical attention, but she made herself look weaker than she was. On the sixth day, he tied her up as he did, told me to stay on the couch, and walked to the bathroom to take a shower. Once we heard the shower start, I watched her as she shifted and wiggled, wincing more than usual. I watched over, staying on the couch, as she shifted and looked over towards the hall where the bathroom was. Miraculously, she had freed her hand. I watched closer as she tried to lean over to her feet and immediately shot back up with a groan. She looked at me, trying to smile, which made her lip bleed. She held a finger to her lips, indicating to stay quiet, but then motioned me over there. She told me sternly but quietly that she needed my help untying her feet. I knew this could be bad. I knew that any moment he could catch her and kill her, but I didn't waste any energy. I immediately went to work on her feet. I couldn't untie my own shoes yet, so I struggled to figure out the knot, but with her little words of encouragement and pointing me in the right direction, I got them loose enough for her to pull her feet through. As soon as she was freed, she grabbed my shoulders and told me to listen carefully. She said that no matter what happens next, no matter what I hear, no matter what happened to her, I should run. Then she told me that I had to remember this next part. She told me a series of directions. Right, left, right, straight, left, right. She told me it was very important to remember that. We repeated it together several times, and then she made me repeat it until I got it right. She told me to put my shoes on, and she stood by the door trying to slip on her own. That's when I heard the most terrifying thing in my life. "What the hell are you doing?" We both jumped and turned to see my dad in his boxers staring at us, his face red and twisted in anger. The water was still running. He had tricked us, whether it was intentional or not. He walked towards my mom, and I remember feeling like I was going to have an accident. He instilled that much terror in me. He grabbed my mom by the throat, and her last words at that point were, "Run." I remember watching for a split second as he grabbed her and slammed her to the ground. I opened the door and hesitated for a split second. I almost turned around to look, but the sound my mother made scared me as much as my father's voice. I knew if I turned around I wouldn't be able to leave, so I ran. God help me, I ran down that road repeating the pattern in my head. Right, right, straight, left, right. Trying everything I could to remember it. I got as far as the first few turns, but my child brain was a jumbled mess of fear, confusion, guilt, and sadness. I feared for my own life as well as my mother's. I was sad that I left her behind. I felt guilty for not being able to save her, and confused as to why he was doing all of this. He didn't care when we were around, and then he did after we left, but continued into his normal routine, but 10 times worse. All I could do was run and hope I remembered the right directions. Then I heard one of the best sounds I had heard all week. Tires on gravel approaching. They were coming from the direction I was going, but for a moment I was terrified that it could be my father coming for me. I stopped and started slowly walking backwards, ready to run back through the field that I had come from. But the car that I saw was not what my dad had been driving. It was a station wagon, and I watched as they slowed down, and a little old lady opened the driver's side door. She looked at me confused and asked where I came from, and I just broke down. I remember shivering, but I wasn't cold, and telling her that he was killing my mom. She asked me where, and I just remembered saying the directions my mom gave me. She told me to get in the car, and she drove me a while, asking me about myself until I fell asleep. Everything after that is fragments. I remember waking up in the car and being at some kind of auto mechanic shop. There was a car with no tires on it and large farming equipment. I noticed the woman wasn't in the car, and I began to panic. I know I was nowhere near my dad, but I was still worried that she may be taking me back there, or even worse, that my mom wasn't getting the help she desperately needed. The woman came back out shortly after, seeing me in tears, and comforted me again, and told me one of the best things I'd ever heard. She told me they found my mom and she was going to be okay. She took me to the hospital a few hours after that, and she waited with me until my mom was out of surgery. She had a broken eye socket, a ruptured spleen, and a fractured skull. 2 broken ribs and 4 fractures. Every breath she took hurt. She refused to eat because of concussion she had, making her sick to even look at food. When they found her, she was lying unconscious on the back porch, her head split open and barely breathing. Apparently, my dad thought he had killed her, and they found him digging in the backyard. You can kind of see what I'm getting at here. The paramedics told her that if they had been 10 minutes later, he would have been right. She was in the hospital for weeks, but that woman we moved in with showed up and took care of me until we brought my mother home. My mother survived nearly dying by the hands of a man that was supposed to love her and protect her. And even through all the fear in her little body, she still made sure that I would get out alive. She had remembered the directions it took to get there, and simplified them for me to remember. She won't admit it, but I don't think she expected to leave there alive. She's in her 60s now, and she's still the strongest person I've ever known. Most of the physical scars have healed, but she still gets some pretty bad migraines. My dad died back in prison in '99 after getting into a fight with another inmate. He had an aneurysm. Mother says that it's only proof that violence will eventually consume everyone who lives by it. So, there's my story of the most terrifying thing to happen not only to me, but my mother as well. And to anyone that might be going through anything remotely similar, just know that you are worth the effort and the time. Someone out there is willing to help. Just know that you're not alone, and when you're ready to take action, we're here for you too. Hello, Raven. I stumbled across your YouTube series about the dark web stories, and I wanted to share one with you about a friend of mine. Someone who I haven't seen since 2009, and have no idea if he's alive or where he is. Keep in mind, we were both around 15 years old at the time. Tetratega was the nickname of my fellow computer nerd, and admitted hacker friend back in high school. From the day he showed me how to shut down a computer using a fake Internet Explorer icon program, to the invention of the infamous X drive, which he created in the school's network to give certain student IDs access to a specific hidden drive, were all kinds of contraband, from teacher addresses, emails, and phone numbers to answer keys for finals, and the usual memes and 4chan-style content were shared. We were friends. And Tetratega was cool. A nerdy, stout kid with Harry Potter glasses, sandy brown hair, and freckles. He had a carefree attitude and a small group of friends, including me. That's not what this story is about, though. Tetratega once told me that he discovered something while probing around on Twitter. When he spoke out about some of the issues going on overseas, and that someone on Twitter had responded to him asking if he really was serious about his political views. Tetratega, never backing down from a fight, and as arrogant as ever, told this account that he was more than willing to back up his political claims with action. The account sent him an unusual link that I had never seen before, and Tetratega told me that it was some real crap, and that he knew how to access the link. I knew a fair amount about computers and the internet myself, some of which I was taught by Tetratega. But this was the first time he ever talked about Tor, an onion browser, or the dark web. Tetratega seemed thrilled and excited, and he told me to meet him after school at his dad's place, and he would show me what he was talking about. Understand that I knew nothing about the dark web or how dangerous the internet could be, and my perspective of hacking was as shallow as making fake shutdown icons on school computers, and thinking that cyberspace was like Tron or the Matrix. I got home from school that day, did my homework, and took my bike over to the house where Tetratega lived. And this is actually the first time I had ever gone to his house. His room was messy, he kept dark curtains over his windows, and he had CPU towers of different shapes and sizes, some dismantled, all around his room. His main CPU was on a tiny, dirty desk near his bed, which was simply a mattress on the floor with a few messy blankets on it. There were other things connected to his computer that, at the time, I didn't know what they were, but I surmised that he definitely had some equipment for doing more than just gaming on his computer. He hopped on the computer and began his flurry of typing away. Opened Tor, and he eventually opened the link that he'd been sent. It opened a website that didn't seem normal to me. It looked like an unfinished black page with white scripting which began scrolling, and even though I didn't know what was happening, I knew that Tetratega was looking more enthusiastic than usual as he opened a small window and began typing away on his own. A few minutes passed as I watched Tetratega do his thing, and then he dug into his pocket and pulled out a thumb drive. He crammed it into the CPU under his desk and kept typing. Suddenly he stopped typing and stared at his screen. I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't answer, and his joyful expression was now replaced with an expression of pure horror. He moved the mouse, pressed the keyboard a few times, and it didn't register right away to me that his computer wasn't responding. He pulled his thumb drive out of the computer and then yanked the power cable out of the wall frantically, which actually did scare me. He then ran out of his room to what I assume was his dad's room, which later on he told me he reset the wireless router there. He told me to meet him in the library after school the next day, and then he sent me home. The next day, when I got to school, I definitely hung around the library as much as I could during the free period we had in the mornings. And Tetratega was usually late, but he appeared, pale, and a lot less arrogant than he usually seemed. He didn't speak, just got on one of the many library computers, did his usual thing, and then inserted the flash drive into the computer. I didn't understand what I was looking at until he explained that he was sent about 16 gigabytes of files containing personal information about employees, government officials, and owners of businesses that were corrupt. He clicked around and showed that the information had been categorized, organized, and that his contact sent it to him, expecting Tetratega to do something about these people. I didn't believe him at first, mainly because Tetratega was enthusiastic about anything computer-related, and he had skills as far as I knew, but the more things he clicked on and opened, the more I realized that the information on the thumb drive looked legitimate. We didn't know who the person was that sent this to him, but Tetra said that his computer was compromised and he hadn't used it since. He also told me that a random internet service van was on his street that morning before school, leaving the name out of it, which hadn't been there before. I didn't notice it when I left his house that day before, but it definitely was there now. This is where things got odd. The next day, Tetra sent me a text in class telling me to meet him in the hallway near the auditorium, which was on a hallway in the back of the school where no one really walked or checked for students. I got out of math class to meet him, and the first thing I noticed was that he was wearing a giant brown hoodie. Like his dad's hoodie. And he seemed pale and terrified. I asked him what was wrong, and all he did was hand me a blank envelope with the name Theodore, last name omitted, written on the front. Tetra said that it was in his locker that morning. I didn't think about it, assuming that the letter was addressed to his father, but what was inside the envelope was far more chilling than I ever expected. There were photos of Tetra leaving and returning to his house, photos of him on a school bus taken from an unknown vehicle, and photos of him on campus in class, as well as in the commons. There were also photos of an older man who Tetra told me was actually his father at his job, and a photo of his mom in front of what he told me was her house across town. His parents were separated, but that's beside the point. My heart began to race as I looked through the photos, hoping that I wasn't in any of them. And it seemed that I lucked out, since I didn't pop up. As if the envelope and photos weren't bad enough, there was a short, typed letter in the envelope that read, "Hello, Theodore, last name. Or should I call you Tetra? The person who sent you the data is dead, and you're next. It sucks that you're some dumbass teenager, but that's what happens when you mess around unprotected on the dark web, thinking it's a freaking game. Don't bother warning anyone or they'll die too, and that includes your father, Martin, last name, and your mother, Eileen, last name. I know where he works, and I know where she lives too. Have a nice day, since it's probably your last." Tetra told me he wasn't sure what to do, and I urged him to talk to the principal. But he adamantly refused because the letter said not to warn anyone. I kept going in and out of believing that this was happening or thinking it was some elaborate hoax since Tetra was such a computer enthusiast. But part of me was becoming very nervous at the idea that someone got photos of him and his family and delivered this note to his locker inside the school. We ended up arguing about what Tetra should do. And eventually I had to get back to class, but he did tell me that he already deleted everything off the thumb drive and threw the thumb drive away at the school. Not that he felt it would help him any. He seemed truthfully afraid, and genuinely worried that something was going to happen to him. I didn't see Tetra for the rest of the week. I remember since, at that time, in school, we were getting ready for our end-of-the-year exams. I didn't go to visit him, but I tried to text him and he never responded. I was terrified to go by his house for a while. I remember that one day I left with my family to go shopping and we passed by his street, and the internet van that he mentioned seeing outside his house was still sitting there. Which I did think was odd, but I never really read too deep into it past that. A couple of weeks passed, and I hadn't seen Tetra at all. So I went by his locker on the first floor of the school. We weren't the kind of friends that had each other's locker combinations, but I wanted to see if it had been cleared out and left open as they usually would do for any available lockers at our school. However, his locker was still closed with his lock still on it. None of the people in our circle of friends had seen or heard from him. They just assumed he was sick, or suspended for one of his computer pranks for the first few weeks. For fear of what the letter said, I didn't ask them if they knew anything about the entire situation. I didn't have any classes with Tetra, so I couldn't ask his teacher if they knew anything. and the front office made it clear that they didn't discuss student information with other students, so I hit dead end after dead end. I did finally work up the courage one Friday evening to go by his house, and I saw that the internet van was gone and instead there was a plain-looking car in the driveway. Thinking that things were okay, I went to knock on the door expecting Tetra Tega to open up and say he'd been sick, or suspended for being on the dark web or something mundane like that. But instead, a man in his mid-40s opened the door. I recognized him from the photos as Tetra Tega's dad. He stood there for a second, looking at me in a confused yet longing expression, as if he'd been expecting someone else. I said hello and told him I was a friend of his son, and asked him if Tetra Tega was there. His eyes went wide and he stepped toward me, asking if I'd heard from Theodore recently. Theodore was Tetra Tega's real name if you hadn't deduced yet. We just didn't call him that. And he asked me when was the last time I saw him. He seemed frantic, almost desperate to hear what I knew. I told him that the last time I saw him was the day after I came over a few weeks back. And most of us just thought he was sick or suspended or something. His father's eyes watered up and he began to sigh over and over, and finally told me that Theodore had been missing from school for weeks, and no one knew where he was. The police had issued a type of Amber Alert for him, but so far nothing had been said. The investigators told him not to lose hope, but he said that the longer it took to hear anything back, the less likely it was that Theodore, Tetra Tega, was alive. I told him I was sorry to hear that, and that I would tell him if I heard from or saw Tetra Tega, but deep down, I knew I wasn't going to. It's been 16 years, and I still never heard what actually happened to Tetra Tega. He didn't have Facebook, MySpace, or anything like that, since back then it wasn't common the way it is nowadays to have social media. And his Twitter account has been deactivated for years. I've never delved into or dealt with the dark web myself, but I understand that if all it took was one mishap to end up missing like this, then I don't want any part of it. I wanted to share a story that occurred during my freshman year of college, over a span of about 8 months. I'm female, and at the time of the story, I was 19. I wanted the whole college experience. I wanted to live in a dorm, meet new friends. I wanted to go to crazy parties and maybe even join a sorority. So, when I started my school year, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to take on the world. This was the same time that I met Colby. Colby and I had several classes together, as I would later learn that we were going for the same degree. We hit it off immediately. He was funny, smart, and just seemed like a genuine guy, always offering to help classmates with notes or study sessions. We quickly became part of the same friend group, hanging out regularly for movie and game nights, study sessions, or the occasional party. When we first started hanging out, he was seeing a girl that didn't go to our school. So I never met her in person, but he did show me a picture of her. And before anyone asks, I felt that there was nothing romantic between us. With him being with someone already, and we both referred to each other as the sister and brother we never had, we were both an only child, I felt that that's why we worked so well, because there was no friction or tension between us. I had several close guy friends at the time, so it was certainly no different for me. Also, I'm not the type to get affectionate with people, no matter the gender. I had my own boundaries, so I was acutely aware if I was getting too physical with people. I didn't like to hug or hold hands or things like that. Never had. My parents thought it was weird that, unlike other kids, I didn't like to be carried or hugged. I'm including this to show again that there was nothing to suggest otherwise, that Colby and I were just friends. But looking back on it now, there were small signs that I should have noticed, but I will say they were easy to dismiss at the time. The first red flag appeared after we had been friends for about a year. Our friend group had a weekend getaway, and we all put together some money to rent a cabin by a lake. I had recently started dating someone, and I brought them along as well. It wasn't a big deal. Others had brought their partners too, and we even asked Colby if his girlfriend was coming, but he declined, saying that she was actually out of town with her family. However, once we got there and all started kicking back, Colby's demeanor completely changed. He became oddly quiet, barely engaging in group activities, and glaring whenever my boyfriend and I were talking. I tried asking him a few times if everything was okay, but he would just brush me off, claiming that he was tired. The next morning, people were already in the living room making breakfast and hanging out, and I decided to grab a shower first. As I went from the bathroom to our room, I saw Colby standing by my side of the bed, going through my phone. I yelped as he startled me, not expecting him to be in the room, and I asked him what he was doing. He jumped and dropped my phone, saying that he was just looking for a photo we took the day before we left for the trip, wanting to send it to himself. It felt off. I was thinking, why not just ask me to send it, but I let it slide, chalking it up to a misunderstanding. He smiled and thanked me for sending it to him, and then left the room so I could finish getting ready. After that weekend, things started changing slowly and subtly. Colby told me that the real reason his girlfriend didn't go on the trip was because they had broken up, but he was too embarrassed to tell us. I told him I understood and apologized, thinking maybe that's why he was in the mood, too. Many of us had our partners with us, and he was probably feeling like a third wheel. From then on, he would text me constantly, sometimes dozens of messages if I didn't respond immediately, which was strange because he knew when I was in class, but he still bombarded me with messages. He'd also showed up coincidentally at places that I mentioned I'd be going to. If I was studying alone in the library, he would suddenly need to study as well, even after just saying that he was all set or not feeling up to it. I didn't mind studying in a group, we did it often, but sometimes I just really needed to focus with no distractions around me, so I would go alone. On these days, when Colby would show up, he would sit right next to me instead of across from me and would just be too uncomfortably close, even though he knew how I felt about being touched and having boundaries. When this continued, I knew that I had to speak up to remind him, so I mentioned how I needed space. He'd become extremely apologetic, sometimes to the point of self-deprecation. "I'm such a selfish and terrible friend. I don't deserve to be around someone as kind as you." The manipulation worked initially. I would end up comforting him, assuring him that he wasn't a terrible person, and then the cycle would begin again. About 4 months into this escalating behavior, I had started dating someone new after breaking up with my previous boyfriend. I found out the guy was pretty skeevy and wanted nothing to do with him. I met this new guy, Hunter, through a mutual friend. He was a sophomore at the same college I was going to, but he had his own apartment, so he didn't live on campus. I didn't tell a lot of people, Colby included, because I wanted to wait until we were a bit more established. However, Colby ended up finding out through a mutual friend, and things took a much darker turn. He confronted me about not telling him and said that he was offended by it. I flat out told him that I didn't have to tell him about my relationships, and explained why I was holding off on announcing it. He did what he normally did and apologized immediately. He knew about the last guy and why I broke up with him, so his reasoning was that he didn't want me to get hurt or be in a similar situation. I told him that I appreciated the concern, but that I could look after myself. And not to mention I saw the warning signs, which is why I left him. Then, that following night, the first really scary incident happened. I was walking back to the dorms after a late night study session in the cafe around 11 p.m. The streets were always poorly lit, and it made it creepy. But it was still on my campus grounds, so I at least felt a little safer. I still had my earphones in with the music low to at least give me something to focus on as I walked back. But as I walked, I had this sudden, inexplicable feeling of being watched that nagged at me, forcing me to turn around. There, about 30 feet behind me, was a figure standing completely still. I was startled at first, but then, even in the dim light, I recognized Colby's jacket. He was being creepy regardless of his intentions. I called out his name, but he didn't respond. He just stood there watching. I called out to him again, claiming that I knew it was him, and that's when he finally stepped forward, acting surprised, as if he hadn't seen me. He ran up to me, smiling, and claimed that he was heading back to the dorms. The men's dorms were on the opposite side of the women's. If this were true, there was no reason for him to be going the way that I was headed. I pointed this out, and he became flustered and then changed his story, saying he was actually coming to surprise me with a late-night coffee since he knew I'd be studying. This was one of those study sessions that I did on a whim. I hadn't told him about it. I told my roommate about the incident, and she suggested that I set clearer boundaries with him. Tell him that unless I specified that I wanted company or invited him, to not just invite himself and show up. And she was right. I met up with Colby the next day and told him his behavior was making me uncomfortable, mentioning how he wasn't giving me my space, and whatever that was the night prior was wholly unacceptable and outright creepy. He seemed to take it well, apologizing profusely and promised to be better about it. For about 2 weeks, things were better. Colby was back to being his old self, the friend that I knew in the beginning, but there were some other strange things occurring around me that, at the time, seemed to be separate events. I noticed small items disappearing from my dorm room. First, it was my hairbrush, then one of my favorite sweaters, even a pair of earrings. My roommate swore that she hadn't done anything with them and no one had been in our room recently that could have taken anything either, and I believed her. She had no reason to mess with my stuff. I thought maybe I left my earrings at my boyfriend's place, and I made a mental note to check the next time I was over there. Then I thought maybe I just left my sweater in a classroom or library and someone may have taken it or tossed it. Then I started getting weird emails from a very generic email address. They started out pretty tame with romantic quotes from books or movies, but then became a bit more unsettling. Talking about how my boyfriend wasn't good enough for me, and one that included a photo of me in the library with the subject line, "You're beautiful like this alone." Someone was in the library with me and took a photo of me. I was freaked out, so I took it to the campus police. They made a report but said that there was little to nothing they could do at the time, and suggested that I document everything and just be vigilant about my surroundings. Feeling defeated and unsafe, I went home, and by the time I got in, I got a text from Colby asking if I wanted to grab dinner. I declined, saying that I was busy and just wanted to stay home. Then, about an hour later, my phone rang. It was my boyfriend, Hunter. He sounded confused and upset. He said that he had just received several messages from me, breaking up with him and saying horrible, horrible things. It also told him not to bother calling me because I didn't want to talk about it, but he called anyway. I clearly hadn't sent any messages. He sent me screenshots and showed the last message, and then all the new ones, but I had never sent them. It was crazy and scary, based on the things they had said. I assured him that I didn't know what was happening, but I certainly had no intentions of breaking up with him. After speaking to a few people about it, Colby included, some suggested that it may have been my ex trying to cause problems. At least, with the emails, I could totally believe it, but I still didn't understand how he had sent the messages. Then it all came crashing down a few weeks later. Hunter stayed home from class one day as he wasn't feeling well, and I was planning on going to his apartment to make him dinner. While I was at my dorm grabbing some things to stay with him for the weekend, I got a call from him, once again in a state of confusion and distraught. He said someone had dropped off a paper bag on his steps. Inside was my missing sweater and a handwritten note that read, "Your girl left this at my place," with a smiley face. Hunter was understandably upset, asking if I had been seeing someone else. I told him absolutely not, and it became a small fight over the phone. He didn't want me to come over at first, but I reminded him of the other weird stuff happening, and he agreed to hear me out. I went over to his place and he showed me the package. The moment I saw the note, I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Colby's. He was left-handed and his Y's were always slanted the opposite way, and he drew his smiley faces at an angle instead of straight up and down. I remember this from copying his notes, the little notes and reminders that he would leave for me as well. I knew it was him. That's when it all came crashing down. He must have taken my sweater at some point. Maybe he even took my brush and earrings. I told Hunter my thoughts, and he told me something that he hadn't mentioned before. He said that he always had this feeling that Colby had a thing for me, but never said anything about it, not wanting to be that kind of jerk. He didn't want me to feel guilty about being his friend or want me to think that he was jealous. I guess we were all still young and love was still a complicated thing. He then shared how he wondered if Colby was also behind the email and maybe even the texts. I mean, if everyone thought it was my ex doing it, why couldn't it be Colby? Together, Hunter and I took all this information to the police and explained what was happening. I even grabbed some notes I had from Colby to compare the handwriting. After seeing everything, they took it seriously and immediately helped me with filing a restraining order. That's when I later learned that Colby had used some kind of spoofing app to make those texts appear as if they were coming from me. Campus IT security was alerted to it because he was trying, and clearly succeeded, at downloading these sketchy third-party apps on campus computers in order to do it. He may have used a public computer, one from the library, but he did this under his own login. Needless to say, it didn't take them long to figure out who was doing it. I changed my schedule so that I wasn't in the classes the same day that he was, even if that meant I had to take a few online courses. I also moved in with Hunter so I wasn't sitting alone in the dorms. Thankfully, he must have taken it seriously, because I never heard from him again. It's been several years since all this took place, but it still affects me and who I trust. The scariest part wasn't even the stalking itself, but how it was from someone I considered a friend. Someone I trusted and at one point would assure me on those scary days. Someone that quickly transformed into something so frightening. I don't want people to hear my story and be suspicious of their friends, but I do want people to make sure that you keep respecting yourself and your boundaries. If your friend cannot respect your wishes, then don't keep them around. That's the first red flag, and I don't think they deserve a chance to let it escalate. I have to share this story about my old childhood home because I felt like I was losing my mind when this happened. My family lived in the same house throughout our childhood. We moved into this house when I was a baby, and when my two other siblings came along, we made room for them too. And when I went to college, I would come home to visit my parents in that same home. I knew the ins and outs of that place. The main floor had the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, a bathroom, and a small closet/pantry off the kitchen. Upstairs had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. The basement was pretty open and empty, other than a spot under the stairs where the washer/dryer hookups were, and my mom had a small laundry area set up there. At least, that's what I always remembered. As an adult, out of college, and out on my own, my parents told us that they were going to retire to Florida. Immediately, I knew I wanted to buy the house from them. As my dad got older, it got harder for him to keep up with maintenance, so the house wasn't in the best shape, but it wasn't like it was uninhabitable. Besides, the market at the time was crazy expensive for anything else, so why not buy something that I could get a discount on and that I already knew inside and out? The first few months were great. I slowly moved my stuff in, after I replaced the carpet and flooring. Once I at least got my stuff in, I started doing more work around the place, just as my dad had shown and taught me. But it was when I started working on the basement that I noticed something was off. When I went to the basement, it was like something was missing. I bought a new washer and dryer that were both front loads. That was different from what my parents had, but the basement itself looked different. But all I could remember about the basement was the laundry area. I looked all over to see if something stood out, but I couldn't spot anything. But then came my weird obsession with counting stairs as I went up and down them. I guess I should mention that, no matter where I went, I have always counted the stairs. I don't know why, but I remember the basement always being 14. I remember this because the stairs leading upstairs to the bedroom had 16, including the base step that curved around. I remember thinking as a kid that the space between the ground floor and upstairs was taller than that from the basement to the ground floor. But when I went back to the basement stairs, there were 15. So I went back and counted. Going down, there were 14, going up, 15. That's just the stairs. I didn't include the concrete basement floor or the ground level floor. I specifically counted the old rickety wooden steps. How could that even be possible? I watched closely as I stepped on each, but my math never changed. 14 down, 15 up. I couldn't sit there and dwell on a rogue step, though, so I set it aside in my brain and moved on, telling myself that it must have been like that as a kid, and that I'm hyper-focusing on it now. But then things only got weirder when my sister came to visit. She didn't live too far away, and she wanted to come see what all I had done to the place so far, so I got some things for us to have a nice lunch and coffee together. We were in the kitchen prepping stuff and snacking when we started reminiscing on things we did as a kid. At one point, she mentioned needing to use the bathroom and joked, asking if she could use the one on the same floor or if she needed to go to the basement. I remember staring at her confused by her comment. We didn't have a bathroom in the basement. They were upstairs and on the same floor. She looked at me strangely and reminded me how Mom would get mad at us for using the bathroom on this floor after swimming because we made the carpet wet. She said that she made us use the sliding door in the kitchen and then use the one in the basement because we wouldn't get the carpet wet. I just remember looking at her funny. What are you talking about? Our bedrooms were upstairs. There are no bedrooms or bathrooms in the basement. She looked concerned. She explained how Dad had built 2 bedrooms in the basement for us. The bathroom in the basement was just a toilet, but he completely redid it, adding an actual bathroom with a stand and shower, and then built the 2 bedrooms for us. She explained how it was just going to be one for me, but she begged to have a bedroom too. She said that we thought it was the coolest thing because we called them our little apartments down there. I did not recall any of this. It didn't make sense. We shared a room upstairs. Our parents had one, and our baby sister had her own room. Why was she remembering something different? She said when I was 12, her 10, they said we needed our own rooms, so he built the rooms in the basement, and they turned the extra room upstairs into an office. But I remembered the office. I remember using our old computer to print out pictures for school. But why couldn't I recall the basement bedrooms? That never happened in my memory. I told her how I remembered Mom making us use the ground floor bathroom so we didn't track water all the way upstairs. But my sister insisted that there was never a bathroom upstairs. So we walked through it together. I showed her the bathroom upstairs. It went our bedroom on the right, the bathroom across the hall, and then our baby sister's and parents' room. She looked so confused as she studied the rooms. And then we went to the basement. I knew then that it wasn't a matter of misremembering. She looked genuinely disturbed, like someone had ripped out a whole memory from under her. She outlined it perfectly. She measured how wide the rooms were and then walked towards the back, explaining where the bathroom was. She even explained how creepy it used to be until Dad had put in a ceiling light and the powder pink carpet. We carefully inspected the concrete, the walls, and the ceiling looking for patches, divots, even color differences, just to prove her theory. To prove that maybe there were walls there or plumbing, but there was nothing. The house was practically handed over to me. There was no time for someone to have come in and tear down all that and then clean it up. So then, how come we had 2 completely different memories? Could that be why the basement felt so weird to me? And do the steps have anything to do with it? Is that 15th step some kind of gateway to a different timeline, where we lived in the room upstairs versus having the rooms in the basement? We were both pretty freaked out about this revelation. We both joked that we were getting old and that our memories were tricking us, so we went back upstairs to enjoy our time together. But deep down, I could tell that she was still thinking about it. After she left, I thought about asking my parents, but to be honest, I don't know if I could stomach asking them. I know it sounds silly, but what would I say if they said they remembered the basement rooms? Yeah, I don't remember that, and the rooms and bathroom down there don't exist anyways. I still have not asked them. I still live in that exact same house, but instead of being afraid of the basement as a kid, well, I'm afraid of it now. I'm worried that one day I will count 14 steps going up again, and the rooms and the bathroom will once again exist. And if that happens, I don't know how I'm going to explain it to my sister. After learning that you also live in Kansas, I decided I should share this story that happened to me back in the early 2000s. It was a pretty terrifying experience, so I think it should fit in. I work in grain storage and transport. Very Kansan of me, right? Well, I survive something that kills dozens of people every year in this job, and not just those that work with grain. I wanted to share this because a lot of people don't realize how dangerous it can be, but I was almost buried alive in a grain silo. It was a pretty routine inspection at our facility. I had checked hundreds of silos before and everything seemed normal that morning. The silo was about half full of corn, and I was checking for moisture levels that could lead to spoilage. The standard procedure is to use a safety harness, but I had forgotten mine in the truck. I was young and stupid, and just being lazy at that point. I didn't want to go all the way back to get it, and I told myself that it was just a quick check. Well, that decision almost killed me. I was walking on the grain with the moisture meter when I felt something change beneath my feet. The surface had shifted. Anyone who works with grain knows what that means. A void space had formed underneath, probably from moisture clumping, and before I could move, the surface collapsed. Grain is much like quicksand, but faster and more powerful. Within seconds, I was waist deep in corn. I tried to pull myself out, but every movement you make only makes you sink faster. And that's exactly what happened to me. The grain acts like a fluid, and the more you struggle, the quicker it pulls you under. I remember when I started this job, and them teaching us about the dangers. I remember them saying that if the grain gets above your chest, it's best to start saying your prayers. The corn reached my chest as I struggled to get my phone from my pocket, but I wasn't successful. I couldn't keep trying and risking burying myself. Not to mention the chances of having signal were slim anyways. Those silos are basically concrete tubes and they dampen sound. But the next problem with this was that the next inspection wasn't scheduled for hours. I had to try and survive for at least an hour before help showed up. But the grain doesn't stop moving. Every breath I took, every slight movement would keep it flowing around me, pulling me in deeper. I know this may sound funny to some, but being buried in corn was not funny. It's not easy to move in it, and it can kill you. It managed to get to my shoulders, and my breaths were becoming more and more shallow because of the weight of it pressing against me. Every time I exhaled, the grain would press in tighter to the point that my breaths became a fight. Something else I learned in our training was if it does get higher than your chest, then you should cup your hands around your face and create an air pocket if you go under. So, that was my only option. I stopped struggling, cupped my hand around my nose and mouth, and raised my left hand as high as I could, hoping to buy me some more time. Then, all I could do was slow my breathing and hope to God they found me before I suffocated. Those moments, knowing they very well could be your last, are some of the most difficult things to deal with. When people talk about their life flashing before them, it's absolutely true. I thought about my life up to that point. I was only 28 at the time, and I had a 4-year-old daughter. I was afraid of leaving her and my wife, and ashamed of being so stupid and lazy, afraid of dying, but I had to continue to keep calm so as to not go under any faster. The grain started to reach my ears, and the pressure was incredible. This had to be comparable to being buried alive in wet cement. The grain pushed against my hand and tried to force its way into my ears and nose. And the sound was awful. Hearing the constant shifting and crushing sounds all around me, I held my eyes closed and felt the kernels pressing against my face. And as I existed there, motionless, accepting that this was it, I heard something above me. A mechanical sound. It was the auger, the machine that moves grain out of the silo. Someone must have come in early, and it was the first time that I wished they hadn't. The movement of grain would pull me under completely in no time, but completely unexpectedly, the grain level around me started dropping. As it dropped lower and lower, I was able to take a full breath again, and at that moment, it was one of the best feelings in the world. Then, I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could that I needed help. Thankfully, it didn't take long because my voice was already getting hoarse from the yelling. They hollered for me, and I told them that I had gotten stuck. From there, the rescue took around 2 hours. They had to secure the area first to make sure no one else ended up trapped or hurt. You'd be surprised by how many people are hurt or even killed trying to rescue someone else that was initially trapped. They had to build this cofferdam around me to prevent the grain from moving with me, and then add the rescue tubes, which were basically just giant metal sheets that held back the grain too. Then they used a vacuum system to remove the grain around me kernel by kernel. I knew I was going to be okay at that point. I wasn't alone, but the fear of it all collapsing on me and burying me more still lingered. By the time they pulled me out, I couldn't feel my legs. The pressure of the grain had cut off circulation. There were grain particles embedded in my skin, and I actually had early signs of crush syndrome. The doctor said if I'd been under for even 10 or maybe 15 minutes more, the weight of the grain could easily have caused organ failure. That was a pretty terrifying thought, knowing that I was that close to death. I knew the dangers of sinking into it, but it causing organ failure was not something that crossed my mind, which set in even more of a panic. I got back home and I hugged my wife and daughter tighter than I ever have. I don't like being in small, cluttered places now, fearing that I used all of my luck that day. But I also refuse to go in those silos without my harness. I absolutely learned my lesson, and as I became a trainer for the newbies, I now use my own story of survival to teach them what not to do. I had something that happened to me in the winter of 2023, and it has definitely given me something to think about, but at the same time gave me a bit of peace of mind. For many years, my sister and I would go to this local coffee shop every Friday and just enjoy our coffee, a muffin, and each other's company. We joked about how the muffin gave us more of a rush than the caffeine some days. We were both married, and I have a young son that was in school by the time we met up. But on the days he was off, he would come with me. My sister and son were almost as close as we were, and I loved it. But, sadly, my sister passed away in a freak car accident. Another car was going way too fast through an intersection, ran a red light, and hit her hard enough to make her car roll. It was an awful, awful time for my family that left me with nothing but questions and an empty space inside me. I was distraught for a very long time. I'm sure a lot of people would have been. Of course, I couldn't fathom going to the coffee shop. I tried for a few months to just get out of the house, but it was too painful. So I stayed away for a very long time. Depression and the pandemic kept me home for almost 3 years, getting out only when necessary, or for the random family gatherings. It was difficult to even do anything for her birthday, but I did it for her. After seeing a therapist, I decided it was time for me to move forward, knowing that she wouldn't want me to stay home and mourn for her. She was far too outgoing and an introvert to allow me to stay home all the time. It's like I could feel her tugging on my arm, like we were teenagers again, her begging me to go with her to a birthday party. So I started going by the coffee shop, the same one that we went to every Friday. I decided it was a good way to still hold on to something close, but also break through the walls that I had built since I lost her. At first, it started with me just sitting up there, not in the same spot that we sat, enjoying a coffee and reading a book, and eventually I was able to do some work up there. I worked for myself, and sometimes I had a lot of paperwork to do, so I took this as a time to get out of the house, have less distractions, and get it done. And the table that we used to sit at was perfect for it. It was in the corner by a large glass window. I could watch the sunrise, feel the warmth on my face, and be out of the way of the people coming and going. Again, it was difficult the first few times, but then afterwards, it felt right. It felt like I was supposed to be there, and it instantly made me more comfortable with it. I expected to have an anxiety attack like I so often did when I thought about this place initially, or her birthday, but that never happened. Instead, the familiar smell of the coffee, the soft jazz or oldies that they played, and the velvet-covered chairs almost made me feel closer to her, and it comforted me. The more I sat up there, the more I started to notice the others that frequented the coffee shop, including a man who I will refer to as Art. He looked to be in his mid-30s, well-dressed but also casual. He always ordered a dirty chai because I remember thinking I should try that. Never had it before, would highly recommend it if you haven't. He always carried a large leather messenger bag, and then when he found his seat, typically in one of the lounge chairs in the center of the room, he would pull out a pretty battered sketchbook and a container of various pencils, erasers, and other similar items. I think he may have had charcoal in there too, based on how his hands looked some days. I would catch glimpses of some of the pages in his book when he turned them, and I saw a lot of people, portrait styles. He was clearly very talented, and I remember thinking that it would be really neat to sit somewhere like in a coffee shop and sketch people and things for the day. I noticed he was there every Friday that I was there, and on the random extra days that I started going, he was also there before I even got there, already set up with his drink. I assumed he probably went up there often. While I worked, I would look over at him and see him looking around and back down at his page intently. And one time I even caught him looking at me, but not in a weird or creepy way. In fact, when I noticed him looking at me, he didn't even look away. He got an eye full of whatever it was and then went back down to his page. I thought maybe he was just people watching, but with him furiously sketching away, I wondered if he was possibly drawing me. But there was nothing remarkable about me either, so maybe it was just a theme or reference that he was using. Someone sitting at a desk or something of that sort. One day I had to leave earlier than normal, and I saw him shuffling his papers quickly around when I started packing up. I didn't think anything else about it. I just remember him moving things around, but he wasn't really packing up. It was almost as if he was trying to find something, or open his other book that he had with him searching those pages. Then there was the following week that I went up there. Once again, he was there before me and already hard at work, nose down to his book. I got my drink and parked myself in my normal spot and started into my work as well. I glanced up at him when I noticed him once again moving things around, and he pulled out a different sketch pad. Then he went back to it, occasionally looking over at me. Since this had become a regular thing, I started to become more curious about what he was drawing. I didn't want to be weird, but I wanted to ask him if I could see some of his work because I was intrigued and loved watching people in their groove and working so fluidly, especially when it came to art. Our mother, also a huge artist, instilled in us how powerful art can be depending on the person, so it's always been something that I cherished watching. If I'm not watching your videos, I'm typically watching something artistic. But overall, I decided against it, not wanting to invade his boundaries or make him uncomfortable. I also know how some people prefer to not be disturbed, so I just continued my own work and thought to myself what he could be creating. That was until I was in my own groove, and I noticed the man push the table out and stretch, with a soft smile on his face, as he looked over his work. I went back to my work when the man ripped out a page, stood up, and to my surprise, walked over to me. At my side, he then handed me the page face down and nodded at me. Confused and curious, I flipped the page over. At first, I was marveling at his abilities. This man was truly an artist. It looked like it was all pencil with a little ink for darker lines and some shadows. It showed me sitting at the same table with my laptop out, focusing on the screen. The woman in the picture was wearing a similar shirt that I was wearing last week, and the hair was pulled back in a clip, like I like to wear my own. But I also wasn't alone in the picture. Across from me sat a young woman, her face obscured by a large sun hat, her hand nearly touching mine on the table. The details were incredible, from the bits of hair in my face to the way I tucked my feet under the chair. But the woman sitting across from me was what made my heart drop. I told him it was incredible and that he was a fantastic artist, but then I asked about the woman in the photo, already having an idea. I'll never forget the solemn smile, the kind reserved for sympathy, when he said, "I like to draw the whole picture. Even when some are no longer present, they're still with you." I looked back down at the picture and nearly cried. That was my sister. She loved her sun hats, and had one to match nearly every dress that she owned. I had never seen this man before, and it had been nearly 3 years since I had even been up here with her. How could he possibly know who she was or what she looked like? He asked me who she was, and I explained that it looked like my sister who had died years prior. He looked like he understood. He explained how he liked to help others heal through his work, and explained that my sister sat there with me every week that I was there. Was this why I felt so comfortable there? Because she was with me? I was a big baby at that moment. Big sobs falling down my face, and I'm sure that a few people looked at me, but I didn't care. I had struggled so long to go back to that coffee shop, not aware that my sister was waiting for me, to continue our ritual. He gave his condolences, but then also told me that he hoped that his work may help me, and reminded me that I'm not alone. Not by a long shot. I hugged that man like I had known him for years. He thanked me for allowing him to work. I thanked him profusely, and then he left. I wanted to cry and ask him so many more questions. How could he have known about my sister? He said that he drew what he saw and drew another person with me. If he had moved here recently, there was no way he could have known us. And I highly doubt that he pulled out a news article from a few years ago and read about a random fatal car accident naming my sister. Even if he did, how would he have known that it was my sister? The most he may know is the name the barista called out, which was Kitty, because it's what my sister nicknamed me as a kid, and I always used it. It was easier for her to say that instead of Sissy. I may have had a lot of questions, but at the same time, I didn't really need any answers, because all I could do was smile and stare at the picture in front of me. He clearly saw something more than what I did. He saw what I couldn't. And all those times I felt warm and comforted there, I wonder if it was my sister, sitting with me as we used to, just letting me know that she was still there, ready to pick up where we left off. Hello, Raven. Here is another story that I'm submitting. I've been on vacation this week, and I had a little downtime, so I sent you one last week called Mom in the Mirror, and now I'm sending you this one, which is also about my mom. Sorry, they're in random order, and are not sequential. Both stories are bizarre experiences that have happened since my mom has passed away. I have quite a few more, but time is always a factor in getting them fully written out. Like many people all over the world, the new year inspires me to clean, organize, and purge things from my homes, closets, workspace, and even my phone. 2025 wasn't any different. I was going through my cell phone, deleting duplicate photos, old messages, and unnecessary things that I saved in my notes. I was hoping to free up more space and be rid of what I wasn't using. My enthusiasm for purging items in my phone came to a screeching halt when I came across a note that I wrote in January 9th, 2024. I had all but forgotten this occurred. I have so many bizarre experiences that I now write them down as a friend of mine suggested. She offered this advice as she has witnessed decades of unusual events and paranormal encounters that I've encountered, concluding that nothing I've ever shared with her was coincidental. She always believed that by writing it down, I may one day learn the meaning behind the event or experience. So on this, the 9th day in January, I was at work. I was in the middle of teaching when suddenly the sound of an unexpected ringing disturbed the focus of my class. It was my phone. Now, normally my phone is automatically set to silent. I don't even have it set to vibrate. I do this for a variety of reasons. This would include my disdain for chronic telemarketers and spam. And I generally don't like being bothered while working, especially when I'm teaching. My phone is on my desk and always within reach in the event of a family emergency or something. My cell phone was sitting in its usual place at the top of my desk, across the room. I was over by the lectern and screen, which was on the opposite side of the room. Then I heard my cell phone ring. I was a bit startled at first, but I paused the lecture momentarily and made my way across the room, hoping not to miss the call. Who could be calling me right now? I wondered. My husband and kids know that I'm at work, and they're at work or school. Perhaps this was an emergency of some sort, I thought. As I made my way to my desk, I thought it was unusual and slightly surprising to hear the sound of my phone ringing. I was certain that my phone was set to silent. By the time I reached it, the call had been missed. The main screen on my phone indicated it was a missed call from France. France? Wait a minute, that's odd, I thought to myself. Well, many of my relatives live in France, but who and why would they call me? They barely ever reach out, and most of the relatives don't have my number. If they ever wanted to contact us, they would likely go through my older sister. I opened my phone and screenshot the call log. It showed the time was at 9:30 a.m. I don't actually know what motivated me to screenshot the call, but I did, and then I set my phone back down on my desk. As I made my way back to the lectern and settled my students, I apologized for the interruption and mumbled something about it being spam. In that moment, I didn't actually know whether or not it was spam. I just made that comment as not wanting to lose momentum. I dismissed the call from my mind and recapped the last concept from the lesson I was teaching. My only focus in that moment was recapturing my students' attention and getting back to the lesson at hand. Later on that day, my mind drifted back to that call. It seemed, well, like a little more than a coincidence. First of all, I have lived most of my life in the US. Secondly, although many of my relatives are from France and there is some rare communication between us, we're not close where we would call each other out of the blue. This doesn't mean we dislike each other, that's not it at all. It's just that families tend to grow apart when they are separated by time and space. It happens to families from every walk of life, and families in every configuration. Life can get busy and complicated. The demands of work, children, and running a household often leaves limited time to connect or reconnect with extended family. Never mind families separated by oceans or a continental divide. Furthermore, when the patriarch and/or matriarch of a family passes away, this too can contribute in families not maintaining cohesion. Ultimately, there are a host of reasons that can cause a lack of closeness, but this isn't really pertinent to the story. Just know that, although my roots are from France, a call from there would be considered quite rare and unusual. You see, my parents moved to the US before my sisters, brother, and I were born. My parents traveled to different countries because of my father's job before settling here in America. They did, however, move back to France a few times after we were born. My mother even moved back to France shortly after my father died when I was 4 years old. That move was short-lived, and she returned to the US due to her strained relationship with her mother, my grandmother. So, as I examined the phone number, I noticed the correct country code, 33, was before the phone number. The phone number also didn't come up as spam. When I checked the time, I got the call. It was 9:30 in the morning, my time. But according to the phone log, the call came in at 10:10 a.m. on January 10th, 2024. This was the date and time in France, not my location. At the time I received the call, it was 9:30 a.m. on January 9th, 2024. But wait, that didn't make any sense. France is ahead by 6 hours from my time, based on my location in the US. I know for a fact I did not mistake the day and the time. I couldn't have mistaken the date to be 1/10/2024 at 10:10 here in the United States. That would be impossible, because I'm not lecturing at 10:10 a.m. The date was also clearly printed on the dry erase board, January 9th, 2024, in the classroom. Furthermore, I wrote a note about this event on January 9th, 2024, in my cell phone, in the notes, and I took a screenshot of the call log. This was a little more than strange. France is 6 hours ahead of my time. That's indisputable. So if the call was made at 10:10 in the morning from France on January 10th, why was I getting the call on January 9th at 9:30 a.m.? That's way more than 6 hours ahead. That's simply not possible. Was this a call from another timeline or another dimension? Was it a technological phone glitch, or was it spam? Even if it was spam, why would the date and time be so far off from France to my location? Was it possible that whomever was calling was using a fake phone number and also was in a different country or location? Is that even possible? Also, if it was spam, then why didn't they leave a message to call them back about some expiring warranty or pretend to be a credit card company or something? It just didn't add up. As I further investigated this strange matter, I noticed the crescent moon icon next to the time I received the call. This crescent moon indicates that the Do Not Disturb feature on my cell phone was turned on. This means my calls are silenced, and all of my alerts and notifications were also set to silent. So then why did my phone ring in the first place? That shouldn't have been possible. Then I began to wonder what motivated me in the first place to screenshot the call earlier that day when I got the call during the lecture. I never do that. The more I dug into this matter, the further down the rabbit hole I felt that I went. I had no concrete answers, and the more I tried to make sense of the call, the more questions arose. Then, something inside of me was telling me to think about it from a different lens. I gathered what that meant was that I needed to think about it from a more spiritual perspective, since nothing logical seemed to make sense or emerge from all of this. I've had a lifetime of many strange and unusual experiences. Maybe there was something supernatural or glitch-like that could explain this call. Suddenly, this call began to feel as if it was connected to my mother directly. I couldn't immediately put my finger on it. The more I thought about the day and time the call was made from France, the more the number 1010 kept jumping out at me. Then it dawned on me. My mom was born on the 10th of a month, but not January 10th. She always chose 1010 for her PIN on her bank cards, her ATM cards, debit cards, and online accounts, and used this number sequence in her email address handle. She even used 1010 as a passcode on her tablet. This somehow had to be connected to her, but my mom has been dead since July 1st, 2019, so I'm pretty sure it wasn't her calling. As I mulled over this situation, I soon remembered something I hadn't thought about since she died. You see, when my mom died, it was in Bar Harbor, Maine on vacation. I got the news from my sister, and it came as a shock, even though I had a very vivid dream about it 2 days prior to her death. The next day, after learning the news about her unexpected death, my husband and I were walking aimlessly around the shops in Bar Harbor, Maine. I was planning the funeral with my sister over the phone, and we were having intermittent phone conversations throughout the day. I took a break from talking with my sister and wandered into a little shop as a distraction. I walked around feeling numb. I had no desire or interest in buying anything. Then, something caught my eye. I saw this beautiful hand-painted ceramic bell. I felt compelled to buy it for my mother to put into her casket on the day of her funeral. While purchasing the bell, I thought that if I heard a bell, that would be a sign that my mom was near. I know that might sound a little crazy, but I wanted a sign to know that she was near me. I guess I was looking for something, anything, to hold on to. You know how people say that when they see cardinals, dragonflies, feathers, or pennies, they believe these things are signs that their loved ones are near? Well, I wanted something like that too. But I wanted it to be different. I wanted something unique to her. In that moment of being drawn to the little bell, I thought of how hearing a bell ringing would be her way of showing me that she was near. Maybe this sounds silly, but I was mourning and wanted a sign. Perhaps it was something that emerged from my subconscious, or from watching the 1946 movie It's a Wonderful Life. You know the part, when Clarence gets his wings and the little girl Zuzu says, "Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings." I don't know. All I knew was that I was in shock that she had died, and was feeling guilty because I had a dream about it 2 days before it happened, and I didn't get to say goodbye. Instead, I was hours and hours away from her on vacation. I just had to have that little ceramic bell. I knew she would have loved it, and I wanted her to be buried with it, and if I heard a bell ring, that sound would let me know she was close. That thought gave me comfort in that moment. I never got a logical or reasonable answer for this strange call. It wasn't spam, and it wasn't a call from anyone I knew. Maybe it's something that can be explained, but I just haven't figured it out. Or maybe it's something I'm not meant to figure out. Could it be that the call was a sign that my mom was near? My phone did have a bell-like ring, and rang even when my phone was set to Do Not Disturb. The call did come from France, where she was from, and the call happened to be on January 10th at 10:10 a.m., a date she was born on and a number that she almost always used for all of her bank cards and passcodes. I really don't know for sure, and I'm not for sure if I'll ever find out, but I do wonder. And what do you all think? So, for backstory, my parents didn't teach me about death before this. I literally thought that everyone lived on forever before this. In defense, I thought this person was taking a nap and I was 4 years old. So, I suppose you could call this my first encounter with death, or at least that's what I think I should call it. We were attending a funeral for our janitor, Dwayne, at our local church. I was notoriously annoying for him because I liked glitter, and he was the janitor. He had to clean up the Sunday schoolroom after I used glitter. Nobody else used glitter in the class. Regardless, I liked him. So I was sad when my parents said that he wouldn't be seeing me anymore. Little me literally thought that people just left because they got tired of me. The casket was in the back room where the pastor would enter the auditorium from the side, so he could walk onto the stage. The back room has a staircase that led downstairs into the hallway by the adult Sunday school room. They had it open for some reason, so he was just there. Young me covered him with one of the blankets that was back there because he was cold. Then I saw him. I saw the same guy that was in the casket. He was standing down the stairs looking up at me confused. One of the other members of the church, Elvin, suddenly ran through him. Elvin stomped up the stairs and yelled, "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" And I ran out of there as if my life depended on it. Because how could he be in two places at once? I tried to explain it to my parents, but My mom said that typical ghosts aren't real, you're going to hell because believing in ghosts is witchcraft. But my parents could never make me stop believing in ghosts. Hey Raven, it's Lola again. In 2017, I got my first apartment. I was 24 and ready to be on my own. It was a very nice one-bedroom with a laundry room in the bedroom. I was lucky with my apartment because I got one of the apartments that had its own private entrance, even though it was a second-floor apartment. To get an idea of the layout, you walk in the front door and are met by steps to go up and directly into the apartment. You have the living room to the left and the door to the balcony taking up most of the far wall. On the right was the dining room, and you turn right to go into the kitchen. If you go straight, you get to the bedroom door and a little area that has a bathroom door and a coat closet. When you enter the bedroom, the closet and a utility room are on the left that share a wall with the living room, and on the right at the back is the laundry room and a space sharing a wall with the bathroom. With all of that out of the way, let me get to the incidents. In October of 2018, my brother's then girlfriend and their 2 kids stayed with me for about 2 weeks while they were between places. They slept on an air mattress in the living room. It was set up by the wall that was shared with my bedroom and closets. She had a perfect view of the top of the steps. Late one night, she was changing the baby. He was just a few months old, so she checked on him often at night. She felt eyes on her, so she glanced around and noticed something at the top of the steps. When she did a double take at the top of the steps, she saw this tall, dark shadow that she described as man-shaped run and disappear as if it went down the steps. For a second, she thought maybe my boyfriend at the time had stopped by, but then realized that she never heard the front door open, either before or after she saw the figure. It just seemed to appear and then disappear. Second incident, I had always felt eyes on me in that apartment. I had been dating a guy for 2.5 years while I was living in that apartment. I had given him a key to let himself in whenever he came over. He worked until late and would normally come over after work. I normally would fall asleep before he got off and came over, but I would always wake up when I heard the front door. I'm a fairly light sleeper. Usually he stopped at the store and grabbed something before he got to my place. And when he got to my place, he would enter the apartment, go to my bedroom, place the bag with whatever he got on the bedside table of the bed closest to the laundry room, remove a layer of clothes, and then get into bed next to me. Well, one night I woke up to toss and turn and then heard a noise out in the living room. I was confused for a moment until I heard what sounded like someone entering my room and go to the other side of the bed, and then heard the normal sounds that came with my boyfriend whenever he would come over. I heard the normal fabric sounds, the sounds of someone walking, a plastic bag, the sound of a can, and then more sounds of fabric like when my boyfriend would remove clothes. When I didn't feel the normal dip of the bed that accompanied him getting in bed with me, I was confused. I still hadn't opened my eyes, so I just listened more intently but didn't hear anything else. Confused, I told my Echo device to turn on the lights and turned to that side of the bed. There was nothing there. No bag, no can, nothing. I got up and looked around the rest of the apartment, but I was alone. I was so very confused. I recently moved to a new apartment in a different state, so far all I've felt here is eyes on me whenever I'm alone. Let's see if anything abnormal happens here. Thank you for what you do, Raven, and stay safe out there. I can't believe I'm finally putting pen to paper. Or, well, typing. I've been faithfully listening to you, Raven, and you definitely have inspired me, so thank you. I have always believed in ghosts. My mom was born in the Hawaiian islands of Kauai. Many ghost stories come from the people who worked the sugarcane fields. One tale was of a man who was murdered with the poisonous flower. He was known as the Maki Man, and was seen floating over the sugarcane fields at night looking for his murderer. If you heard him coming, you were supposed to lay flat and keep your forehead to the ground so you wouldn't be tempted to look in his direction. If you would look, he would suck the life out of you, much like the Dementors in Harry Potter. You continued to remain still so the night marchers who followed him wouldn't take you either. This, along with many other stories, kept me lying face down, staring at my mattress many nights until I fell asleep. In 1968, my parents were fishing in Morro Bay, California. My brother was supposed to go with them, however, they were going to be gone too long, so we would have missed the first day of school. During their visit, it was decided that he would have to stay home with the promise he could go next time. A few nights after they left, we were all asleep. At the time, we lived in the mountains, and our house had a divided loft that my brother and sister and I shared. As we all slept comfortably, my brother started to scream. It was a terrifying scream. Everyone woke up. Me, fearing the Maki Man, was taking him laid flat as I could on my bed. Of course, my mom came running up the stairs, exactly what she told us not to do, to see what was wrong. My brother said that Grandma and Grandpa were sitting on his bed, that they kissed him. Casually speaking, my mom said it was a dream, just a sweet, little dream. My brother, still inconsolable, continued to cry and said, "No, Mom, they are ghosts." My mom reassured him that he must just be missing them because he wanted to go fishing with them. Still not convinced, I remained in my bed face down. I was not going to succumb to the Maki Man or his followers, the Night Marchers. A couple days later, my mom was watching a news story. The police were attempting to identify a couple who was found dead in a camper from carbon monoxide poisoning. Apparently the night had become cold, and the couple had brought their small hibachi barbecue to keep warm, not knowing that it was toxic. They peacefully passed in their sleep along with one of their dogs. Another couple who was camping noticed that a big dog outside the camper appeared to be restless. The couple remembered seeing the older couple and went to check on them, and they found they had passed away. Upon seeing the news footage, my mom began to wail that deep, tragic wail that someone makes when they are grief-stricken. A mournful wail that comes from deep within your soul. If you've heard it, you know what I mean. Within minutes, the phone began to ring as relatives and friends who saw the story realized it was our grandparents. Of course, my brother already knew. He knew the day that it happened, when they came to say goodbye. My brother has had many other ghost sightings, so many that he doesn't cry anymore. Quite the opposite. He always wonders, had he not screamed, if he could have communicated with them. His fear is that he scared them away from what would have been his last communication with them, which would have been a true gift. Our family is very good at saying their final farewells. A family photograph that hung on the wall very securely fell off the wall twice. The glass never broke, and we were able to simply rehang the portrait. The first time it fell, our uncle, who was not ill, had passed, while working as a cook on a merchant marine ship. After it fell, my mom looked at the picture and instinctively knew that bad news was coming. The very next day, we were notified of his passing. The second time it fell, our entire family became nervous with anticipation as my mom rehung the portrait. We didn't have to wait a day this time. It was hours later when we were told that another uncle had passed. Following the second funeral, my mom took the portrait off the wall. She announced that we wanted to find out like everyone else. At the time, she wasn't looking at us. It was like she was announcing to the powers that be. A phone call or a very alive visitor is how she wanted to find out. We asked our mom what the difference was. Someone still had passed. She simply said that the anticipation of who it might be caused her more anxiety than the actual notifications. I hope to share more stories if you like this one. I do. I have quite a few years under my belt, which definitely means more stories. Alright, so this story, or this part of this episode, is going to be a little different from normal. I recently did a question to my audience asking what kind of content you wanted to see on the channel, and a significant number of the people that responded said they wanted some research-level content. Stuff about the topic that is a researchable thing, I guess, that can be explained or told about. Sort of like true crime stuff, to some extent. I'm not sure how deep I'm willing to jump into the true crime stuff for this channel, but I wanted to give it a shot. So this is the first of this idea. I got with a friend of mine, Tom K, and he writes this kind of content for another channel. And we talked about things, and I wanted information about something from the dark web that he wanted to write about. I gave him full creative control on it. He did the research, he did the write-up, and I decided to go ahead and use it in a dark web video, because it's a dark web situation, so yeah. If this isn't your cup of tea, I understand, but a lot of people wanted it, so I thought, why not give it a shot? And as such, here we go. The free market, or a marketplace of ideas. Euphemisms? Perhaps. Naively idealistic? Well, most certainly. The notion that a market can be established around any and every need or demand sounds great. In theory. When one actually takes into consideration the darker aspects of human nature, greed, vice, etc., then it should come as no surprise that places like today's subject, the Wall Street Marketplace, or WSM, come into existence periodically. 99% of all crimes are those crimes of opportunity. And when you have the near complete anonymity of the dark web coupled with untraceable Bitcoin transactions, then such dens of inequity don't just become highly likely, they become inevitable. And maybe that's what today's story is really about. The inevitability of things brought about by situations, and how intrinsically connected all these events truly are. The great virtue of a free market system is that it does not care what color people are. It does not care what their religion is, it only cares whether they can produce something you want to buy. Quote, Milton Friedman. If a good or service has a demand, then it's marketable. That is what they say, at least. Some goods and services have been deemed by wide sections of society to be unacceptable. Purchasing illegal drugs, for instance, is frowned upon in most societies, and in some places merely having an illegal substance in your possession is a death sentence. Marketing other services such as hacking skills or software, murder or theft for hire. All things that are taboo to offer, yet all things that are in demand. Seeing the demand for these and other illicit goods and services, and in the wake of the downfall of the darknet marketplace Silk Road and other nefarious markets, 3 German men, Thibaut Lausy, aka Coder420 and Codex420, Klaus Martin Frost, aka The One or Dude Boy, and Jonathan Kalla, aka Kronos, began the Wall Street Marketplace. Their services were easily accessed by using a Tor browser and signing up for a free account using a moniker and a password. Once registered, the services offered were wide and varied. Some of the categories available to browse included drugs, counterfeits, jewelry and gold, cardingware, services, software and malware, security and hosting, fraud, digital goods, and guides and tutorials. And each transaction was handled through that lovely untraceable cryptocurrency known as Bitcoin. Over the course of 3 years, 2016 to 2019, the WSM marketplace would host 5,400 vendors selling to 1.15 million people worldwide, aiding and abetting the entire rainbow of crime. From the marketing of illicit drugs such as marijuana and amphetamines to fake or stolen identities, you could find it all right there on the WSM. Another prominent figure in the WSM's day-to-day administration was Marcos Paulo de Oliveira Anibal of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Anibal was a moderator who, among other things, mediated disputes between vendors and their clients. One can only imagine what these disputes may have looked like, and just what mediating them might have entailed. Annabelle was also something of the public relations guy for the marketplace, having been the one who went to sites such as Reddit and made promotional posts for the WSM. Drug distribution on a global scale, money laundering, and a whole host of other criminal activity occurred under the auspices of the WSM administrative team. But, of course, it was only a matter of time before the law came investigating this worldwide network of shady dealings. Just like every city has that one neighborhood you should avoid, the one where leaving your car parked unattended is just something you don't do, so too does the internet have its wretched hives of scum and villainy. These places take many forms. The Silk Road, Alpha Bay, or the forebear of today's subject, German Plaza Market. The amount of things you can find on these darknet marketplaces is truly staggering. The basis of appeal is the complete anonymity the dark web provides. With the rise of cryptocurrencies the world over, committing cyber-based crimes has never been more lucrative. The untraceable nature of blockchain transactions make them the most secure way to move money from one place to another without drawing attention to the transaction. The proverbial noose began to tighten in 2017, when full-blown investigations into the administrators began to take shape in 3 countries, with a veritable soup of alphabet agencies beginning an international effort to identify and detain the heads of WSM. And the charges really ran the gambit. Trafficking of illegal narcotics, malicious software, stolen financial data, counterfeit goods, and other contraband overwhelmingly topped the list. But this made inevitable the second crime that authorities really seemed to pursue against the administrators: death resulting from distribution of fentanyl. When everything is laced with the most potent opioid on the planet, and you facilitate the distribution of millions of dollars worth of narcotics all over the world, then it becomes inevitable that eventually this kind of thing is going to happen. Nor is it something to be taken lightly when it does. Now, this is the part that made the story jump out and really get my attention. The administrators were aware, or at least suspected, they were being investigated. However, it wasn't until they pulled one big virtual heist that the full weight of law enforcement came down upon them. For 3 years, WSM operated on the dark web, facilitating countless crimes of every nature. As is common in large marketplaces, the virtual currency was held in marketplace escrow while the vendors delivered their illicit goods and services. And in April of 2019, as the law enforcement of 3 countries began to get closer, the administrators of WSM decided to abandon ship, and they diverted around $11 million into their personal accounts, in what amounted to a huge virtual heist. On April 16th, the vendors of WSM found they were unable to withdraw their virtual currency, being held in escrow, which is ironically what actually triggered the German authorities to execute a series of arrests and search warrants. After years of monitoring several computers based in Germany and in the Netherlands to host the WSM or GPM servers, or facilitate the transactions, the authorities had been able to ferret out the 3 German men, and within days the Brazilian accomplice, and bring an end to the preeminent dark web marketplace of the late 2010s. The 3 defendants were alleged to operate a sophisticated online marketplace where buyers could engage in encrypted communications with vendors, but also an online forum where they could discuss various vendors and the quality of their wares or services. As the investigation played out, it was discovered the 3 primary suspects had previously operated another German-based darknet marketplace, and they were able to tie several computers based in Germany and the Netherlands to use in both the previous GPM site and the WSM. Part of what the administrators did were maintaining the website and operating the marketplace to ensure vendors and buyers could access each other, and that financial transactions were properly processed, meaning they had full access to the virtual currency that passed through the marketplace. One of the big breakthrough moments for the entire investigation was when one of the defendants accessed the WSM computers using a VPN. That's a virtual private network. However, the VPN connection failed, and his IP address was revealed, allowing them to find his specific location. Another key part of the investigation were the presence of an undercover special agent from the FBI who purchased a FULS, or full set of identifiers: name, date of birth, social security number, address, and credit card number, of a resident of California from a vendor on WSM known as David CVV. Law enforcement also managed to identify two of the largest drug vendors on WSM, Platinum 45 and Lady Skywalker. Both were subsequently arrested for their activities within WSM and other darknet marketplaces. In conclusion, at the time of writing, this particular case is about 6 years old, having been concluded in 2019. So, it goes without saying that another bizarre of the bizarre has likely come and gone in the intervening years. Perhaps someone listening to this could even tell you the name of their heir apparent. But, as long as people have their vices, as long as society seeks to regulate and curtail certain behaviors, then places like WSM will always find a way to exist. They will always cater to the needs of the people with dark desires, and they will always do these things as long as there is money to be made doing them. I will leave you again with the words of Milton Friedman, the father of economics. The black market was a way of getting around government controls. It was a way of enabling the free market to work. It was a way of opening up, enabling people. I was around 11 or 12, living in a deeply religious household where every rule seemed etched in stone. I was the youngest and definitely the most spoiled. So, having my own phone, an old iPhone 4 or 5, was a big deal. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I received a text from an unknown number. It was a list of religious guidelines, formatted with bullet points. I don't remember every word, but one line chilled me to the core. Do not look into mirrors at night with focus. The wording was strangely specific. Our religion is ancient, so I figured it meant not to stare too long at our reflections in the dark. Still, the emphasis on mirrors unsettled me. I shrugged it off and drifted back to sleep. The next day felt normal, except the text was gone. I searched every message on my phone, but it had vanished, as if it had never been sent at all. Yet that single warning about mirrors took root in my mind. Night after night, I began avoiding them. I would rush through the bathroom, washing my hands so fast that I never dared glance upward. And even the thought of walking past the many mirrors in our home after dark sent shivers down my spine. A week later, alone at home one night around 10 p.m., my family had gone out, leaving me behind to finish some homework. I decided to confront my fear. Fueled by a reckless mix of defiance and curiosity, I resolved to prove that the warning was nothing more than an eerie message. I approached one of the sinks outside the bathroom, steeling myself, and stared into the mirror. I leaned in close, my face nearly pressed against the cold glass, and fixed my eyes on my own pupil, determined to defy the fear that had haunted me for days. In less than a second, a wave of dizziness crashed over me, like the disorienting rush you feel when you stand up too fast. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. When I dared to look back into the mirror, my blood ran cold. There, standing next to my reflection, was a girl. Not just any girl, but a tall, spectral figure with skin the color of cracked stone. Her hair hung in disarray, partially obscuring a face where eyes should have been. Instead, it was just an endless void, a gaping emptiness that seemed to suck the light from the room. For 2 long, heart-stopping seconds, we just stared at each other. And then, as if the moment had never happened, I looked to the side, only to find nothing there. I ran, leaving behind that cursed mirror and the haunting image of the girl who should not have been there. Hello again, Raven. I hope you're doing well, and I have another story that I wanted to share with you about a recent situation a friend of mine and boss went through. Not sure what category it fits into. We'll call her Carly to protect her identity, as the situation is still being, quote, investigated. But I figure you might be interested in a modern story that's scary and crazy. I named this story Tyler House because it centers around a house my friend has told me about that used to be a hangout spot for her and some of her friends and coworkers. After what has happened recently, this house is no longer the hangout spot. This was in summer, June of 2022. Carly is the manager of a pizza shop in a gas station lot in McDonough, Georgia. And she's 27 years old, energetic, and fun. And a lot of her coworkers are her friends as well. She takes her job seriously, but she's also a cool person to work for. Other employees at the coffee shop and gas station also know and love her, and her friends from high school and college also grew up in the area and still keep in touch. One of her longest friendships is one with a man that we'll call David to protect his identity, and unfortunately he had a bad run-in with some more troublesome crowds in their youth, and has been in prison for the past 8 years. He was released on this year, and Carly had been working hard to save up for a place for herself and her daughter so they could move out of her best friend's house, and she had hopes of rekindling the relationship she had started with David prior to his incarceration. They kept in contact by mail until the week finally came where David was released, and Carly couldn't wait to go pick him up. They spent a night together, and then Carly went to work, the same as always, excited that she could finally have the man that she loved back in her and her daughter's lives. Things went well for a week, and then changed when Carly returned home from work on a Friday evening in June to find that David wasn't there, and he wasn't answering his phone calls or texts. He had disabled the 360 tracking app on his phone as well, and Carly began to worry about him, since most of her friends and the few coworkers that also knew David hadn't heard from him or seen him in a week either. A week went by before a friend that we will call Peter showed up at her job and asked to speak to her out back. He told her that he had seen David briefly at the Tyler house a few days ago, and that he was planning to catch a ride to Florida, stay a few days, and then backpack to Georgia on his own. Something that Carly knew meant that David was once again shuttling, using, and most likely selling drugs again. She thanked Peter for his tip, and Peter informed her that David made sure to tell him and a few others not to tell Carly where he was. Later on that same day, Carly's grandmother called her to tell her that she'd heard from David when he called asking her for money. And she told him that she didn't have any and wondered why he didn't ask Carly. David lied and told her that he was currently mad at Carly because he came by her job and saw her sitting in her truck with another man and accused her of cheating on him. Carly was taken aback by the accusation, since it was true that her and one of her best friends and coworkers would often take smoke breaks together, sometimes sitting in her truck on her breaks to do so, but her coworker was not romantically interested in her or any woman. In fact, since he loved men. Carly knew the story was trash, and she sent him several unanswered texts trying to get a hold of him, all of which were left unread and never responded to. Carly's grandmother told her to not worry about the situation, and that David would turn up soon on his own, as he had often done in the past when he was angry and needed time to cool off. Carly went back to work, and even though she worried for her friend, she focused on doing her job. A week after that, a local police officer, Ben walked into the pizza shop to order a meal and began to flirt with Carly, insisting the two hang out sometime off the clock and get to know one another. She agreed to do so, and the two had dinner at her apartment. He asked her a lot of questions about herself and showed genuine interest. But it wasn't until the officer began to ask questions about her friends and family that Carly became slightly alarmed. Ben began to ask her about her hangout habits, and if she had been out in certain areas recently, and at one point, mentioned the area of McDonough not far from where the Tyler house was. She lied and told him that she didn't frequent that area, sensing that something was off about the lineup of questioning. Midway into their visit, Ben got a call that he stepped outside her apartment door to take discreetly, and minutes later came back in to tell her that he had to leave for work. Carly walked Ben to the front door of her apartment, where he told her that if she ever needed anything taken care of, he could help her out, no matter what it was. Carly dodged the unusual statement by telling Ben that he was sweet, and before he left, she realized he had left his jacket on her couch. She made a joke, insisting that since he had left it there, she would keep it as a souvenir of their visit, something that triggered Ben, since he rushed back into the house and took his jacket in a cold manner, insisting that he never leaves anything with anyone, which, again, gave Carly another odd sensation about him. He left briskly without saying anything else. And that same night, hours later, Carly did get another text message that alarmed her. After not hearing from him for almost a month, Carly was surprised to see a message from an unsaved number in her texting app. It wasn't a written message, however. It was a headshot of David, bruised, bleeding, and with a severely swollen black eye. She immediately tried to call him, but each call went straight to voicemail, so she texted him, asking what happened. All he texted back was, "I'm okay. A rough night with friends." And then, "I had a fight with my friend. I'll call you tomorrow." Fed up with the drama surrounding David's whereabouts, Carly had her coworker come over and watch her daughter as she decided to go looking for David on her own. And the first place she was going to look was the Tyler house. The Tyler house sat on 10 acres of a tree-covered land, bordered by a wooden fence. And the house itself was tucked deep inside, accessible only at the tail end of a snaking gravel driveway that stretched out a half-mile from the main two-lane country road. Apart from the two-story main house, there was a separate walk-in tool shed, a standalone carport, and several abandoned cars in the front of the house, as well as a few working vehicles parked on the right side of the house. She recognized the small sedan and pickup truck that belonged to the Tyler family. But the third vehicle parked slightly behind theirs was one she hadn't seen before. Behind the house was a greenhouse, an additional tool shed of a smaller size, and more tree-covered land that rose and fell, and eventually led to one of the many rivers that cut through the area. As she approached, she began to feel uneasy all over again, as her additional attempts to call and text David continued to go unanswered. She never told David that she was going to the Tyler house, because she feared that if David was in more trouble than he let on, he would disappear on her and go off on his own again, even if he needed her help. Carly pulled her car up a few feet away from the house and parked off to the side of the gravel driveway and walked the rest of the way to the front door of the older white house she had known for many years. The screen door was open, but the main door behind it was locked, so she knocked on it with a heavy fist to make sure that someone heard her. She didn't care about ringing the doorbell. In fact, she noticed that it was missing, but completely dismissed it, wanting simply to get someone's attention as soon as possible. She couldn't hear anyone talking inside the house, but seconds later, her friend Peter came to the door and opened it quickly with a terrified expression on his face. He demanded to know why she was there, and before she could answer, he shushed her and pulled her into the house, locking the door behind him, and began guiding her past the cluttered living room and up the small carpeted staircase on the left side of the house. Once upstairs, Peter looked around and then opened the door on their right, pushing Carly into his bedroom and locking the door. Carly demanded that he tell her what was going on, and Peter once again shushed her, noticeably terrified and trying his best to keep her quiet. "What the hell are you doing here? You can't be here right now," Peter told Carly silently but forcefully. Carly did her best to explain what was going on, including the text message she'd gotten from David a little while ago. Peter let out a frustrated sigh and opened his own phone to show all of the texts from David's original phone number, where he mentioned that he and some friends were keeping tabs on a competing supplier in the area, waiting for a chance to take him down. Peter then showed her messages from David's new phone number from the past week, which detailed how he and a couple of male friends that Peter didn't know and had never seen before had attacked someone who was delivering drugs from a rival supplier, and beat him nearly to death before they robbed him of his product and his money. David apparently lost his own phone in the process and had to get a new burner phone. They brought their loot to stash at the Tyler house, where the youngest son of the Tyler family, Mark Tyler, was going to redistribute and sell the product himself. They threw a small party and invited a small group of extended friends who engaged in drinking and the usage of the product. Peter told Carly that after being there for a couple of days, David and the two new friends decided to go out to a local bar for drinks several hours before Carly showed up to make contact with the local customer, and that was the last time he heard from David. Mark Tyler wasn't home either, and oddly enough wasn't answering any phone calls or texts all day. Carly was slightly confused, but she still wanted to know why Peter was acting so spooked. He told her that about an hour before she arrived, a black car that resembled an undercover police vehicle pulled up to the house and sat there for a long time. Someone got out with the flashlight and began looking around their property, but never rang the doorbell or knocked. Peter had closed all of the blinds and curtains, locked all the doors, and had been hiding in his room until he saw the headlights of Carly's car pulling up the driveway. And if he had known she was coming, he would have told her to stay away from the house tonight. And Carly's heart began to race even more as Peter opened the Ring app and showed her the last video clip, which showed someone approaching the front door, using a flashlight to blind the camera, and then forcibly removing the entire camera by hand. There was a split-second glimpse of the man's face, and Carly's eyes went wide when she realized she recognized who it was. Suddenly it made sense why Ben was asking about her friends, hangout patterns, and areas that she would go to hang out. There was a loud bang and the sound of breaking glass in the back of the house, and Peter and Carly knew that someone had broken into the back door of the Tyler house. They heard some slight rummaging around, and then loud, slow stomps on the staircase heading to their room. There were two firm knocks on the door, followed by an attempt to open the door, and finally the man spoke in a voice that Carly recognized all too well. "Carly, I know you're here. I recognized your car outside," Ben stated calmly to her. Carly didn't answer, frozen in place and afraid to admit to herself that it was actually Ben the policeman, the guy she had just spent an entire evening with, on the other side of the door. "I was hoping you weren't involved in this situation, Carly. As you can see, it's pretty bad. Your friends are into some deep stuff, deeper than you know." Ben continued trying the door once more. Carly still couldn't bring herself to say anything back and almost screamed when 3 powerful fist knocks suddenly rang out against the wooden door again. "Don't effing act dumb. I know you're in here. I've checked the entire house, and I know you're in that freaking room," Ben screamed through the door. This time Peter was the one who answered. "Get the F out of here, man. I've already called the cops, and they're on their way," Peter shouted back. Ben let out a dry laugh outside the door, which was much more eerie than everything else he had done thus far. "Carly, your friend in there doesn't know, does he?" Ben asked casually through the door. Peter looked at Carly, and she finally found her ability to speak, turning her head slightly away from the door to look back at him. "He is the police," she whispered to him, her voice wavering with fear. "Look, Carly, I'm gonna have to resolve this whole situation. Your friends not only stole from some very influential people, but they also put my brother in the hospital in the process. Your dumbass boyfriend lost his phone, but my brother found it that night. And now I have it. I know about David, and I know about his buddies, and I know all about you too, Carly. I'm here to get our stuff back and clean house, and I really wished you hadn't come here tonight," Ben stated once more in a much more sinister manner. It suddenly dawned on Carly and Peter why Ben kept insisting that he really wished that she hadn't come there that night, and why Mark Tyler was nowhere to be found. "Peter, when's the last time you saw Mark?" Carly whispered. He shrugged, approaching his window on the other side of the bed, where he quickly began to undo the latches. There was a portion of the roof they could use to get down to the backyard, and if they moved fast enough, they could either hide in the shed or make a run for it to the river through the trees. As soon as the latch clicked, there was another rough jingle of the locked doorknob, and Carly didn't hesitate to slide the heavy wooden chest of drawers in front of the room door to buy them some time. Peter got the window open as heavy kicks began thumping out against the blocked door behind them, and Carly and Peter escaped onto the roof section of the back patio, and into the backyard where they ran for the tool shed. The sound of heavier kicks and a few curse words rang out in the near distance as Peter dialed 911 and then stopped and looked at Carly in the shadows. "I can't do it. That house is loaded with drugs, and I know about all of it. Plus, if this guy is a cop, there's a chance we might not make it out of this without him finding us," Peter reasoned frantically. "Look, if we can make it to my car out front, we can get out of here and go somewhere safe," Carly pleaded with him. The heavy thuds of kicks suddenly ended, and a few seconds later, Ben was stepping through the broken glass of the back door, sweeping his flashlight across the backyard area behind the house. It was pitch black in the back of the house, except for the glow of Ben's flashlight, but there was enough light from the moon itself to see. Carly and Peter maneuvered carefully around the backyard area, using the trees and miscellaneous junk in the backyard. And when Ben approached the rear of the yard area leading further into the trees, Peter and Carly made a run for her car and escaped. On the way home, she called her coworker and told her to get her daughter dressed and meet her at her mother's house. Once they got there, Carly told her mother and stepfather what happened, and they called the police. It was later revealed that there was no Officer Ben working in that particular county, and that he most likely had purchased the uniform from a costume supplier and obtained a former police vehicle at an auction, or had his vehicle made up to look like an undercover patrol car. Either way, Carly and her daughter didn't go back to their apartment for months, and Carly has already made plans to move. Peter and Carly were not able to get a hold of David for another month, but found out that he had made it safely to Florida, where he intended to stay, somewhere safe until things blew over. Since his first phone had been lost and recovered by the fake Officer Ben, he couldn't trust any of his usual people and didn't have most of his contacts, but he pulled some strings to get safely out of the state. In August of 2022, a man fitting the description of Officer Ben was apprehended by actual county police officers, thanks to an anonymous tip. It's now 2025, and Mark Tyler still hasn't been found, and the case has since gone silent, not even making a blip on the local news. The Tyler family still awaits word on the whereabouts of Mark Tyler, or his remains. I know that this is a longer email, and I appreciate your patience in reading it all. I got my friend's permission to submit this all to you, and thank you again for your time. Hi, Raven. Big fan of the channel. After listening to the latest work stories, I realized that I finally have my own little experience to share with you. Many years ago, I worked in a pub in a small town in England. The pub is known as one of the most haunted in the area, and we frequently hosted paranormal investigators and invited them into the cellar. I had never experienced any paranormal activity and was growing increasingly skeptical. Until, one night, I was closing the place up. I'd cleaned everywhere and turned off all the lights. Before I was going to leave and lock up, I decided it would be best to use the toilet. So, I headed back through the now dark bar, illuminated only by the emergency exit sign, and into the toilets. As I stepped up to use the urinal, I heard footsteps, and it was clear that someone was coming into the toilet. Not particularly unusual. Although the pub was empty, this could easily have been the owner or someone from one of the hotel rooms upstairs. I turned my head to see who was coming and saw absolutely nobody. Not a soul. I finished up and walked back through the bar, where I noticed that a bag someone had left was now swinging on the coat peg that it was on, as if someone had brushed past it. I stood and watched it keep swinging for maybe 3 minutes. It never lost momentum, as if someone kept swinging it. I decided to get out of there as fast as possible. I rushed home and had a terrible night's sleep, but I will never forget that bag. Raven, your channel is perfect for helping me fall asleep each night. Multiple times a night, as I wake up often in the night. I'm thankful that you divide your stories into chapters, so when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can go back to where I was when I fell asleep. Thank you. Some people might consider this a glitch in the Matrix story, but it occurred in the late 80s, before the Matrix was even a thing. So I've always called it my guardian angel story. I should also tell you that I'm female. When you're reading stories, I always wish the storyteller would specify their gender, as it's harder to get into the story not knowing. Anyway, I was driving back to college my freshman year, after having been home for a couple of weeks for an emergency surgery that I needed. I was only 17, as I had graduated high school a year early, and my young age combined with the fact that I wanted to be home with family after having gone through the fairly traumatic medical event, left me feeling lonely and homesick. It was a 3-hour drive, and I glanced in the rearview mirror to notice a car that had been driving in my vicinity for quite a while. Sometimes it was in front of me, sometimes behind me. But it seemed like every time I looked, it was there. It was an old 70s model. I don't remember the color, and I never really saw the driver, as the car was usually a good distance from me. I didn't feel like I was being followed, and it didn't really creep me out or anything. Being a Christian, I thought maybe it's my guardian angel keeping an eye on me. I kind of laughed at myself for the silly idea, but the thought of it comforted me and made me feel not so alone, so I embraced it. It stayed within my line of sight for quite a while, until eventually I realized I needed to stop for gas, which kind of made me sad to leave the car that was watching over me. Oh well, I was comforted for a little while, and that was enough. So I thought to myself, goodbye, guardian angel, as I watched the car continue on the highway, and I turned onto the exit. I filled up and got back on the highway, listening to those great 80s hits on the radio. Within minutes, I looked in my rearview mirror, and there it was again. That car. My guardian angel. I tried to think of where it had come from. How could it have gotten behind me like that, when it didn't exit with me and I saw it continue straight on the highway? There were no other exits after the one I took that he could have exited and gotten back on, catching up to me, and I would have seen him parked on the side of the road if he had pulled over. At this point, I felt sure that someone or something was keeping an eye on me, making me feel protected. I don't remember how long that car stayed with me. I just know that whoever was in that car made this homesick girl's day, and made a long, lonely drive not so lonely. Hello, Raven, and thank you so much for reading my story. I hope you're doing well, and I wish you a happy holiday with your family and close ones. I have another story that I'd like to share with you. Recently, I've been dealing with insomnia and can't seem to sleep properly. Most nights, I just lie in bed listening to your videos. Some of the stories that you've shared remind me of a strange dream I had when I was in secondary school about 13 years ago. I still remember every detail of that dream vividly. It happened on a summer day. After lunch, I took a long nap, and in my dream, I found myself back in my primary school. I was in my classroom on the third floor, chatting with a friend during recess. It felt like an ordinary school day. Then I walked out into the hallway, and suddenly I heard a frantic voice calling my name. It was a female voice. I turned around and saw a ghostly figure of a girl. She asked if I remembered her and then leapt towards me, wrapping her arms tightly around my waist. The entire time she kept begging me to help her, crying out that she didn't want to die. I couldn't see her face. She appeared as a shadowy figure with no legs, just floating there. As she held on to me, I was shocked and a bit frightened. And then I realized that both of us were floating outside the hallway fence about 10 meters above the ground. It was terrifying, and that's when I woke up, drenched in sweat. I immediately wrote down the dream in my notebook, though I'm pretty sure that notebook is long gone now. The creepiest part wasn't just the dream itself, but the physical sensation that I felt afterward. You know the feeling when someone hugs you so tightly that your body aches or feels compressed afterward? And that's exactly how my waist felt. The same spot where the ghost had hugged me in my dream. After graduating from primary school, I lost touch with most of my friends. Every now and then I try to search for them online, but I've never been able to find out if any of them passed away or if the dream was just a strange coincidence. Even so, that dream has stayed with me all these years. Thank you once again, and when I have more time, I will write to you some stories of my aunt, who does have a sixth sense. She can talk to ghosts and can lend them her body so they can possess her. Please do. Those stories, I really don't have any explanation.